श्री भगवती जी की पातशाही 10वीं। प्रथम भगवती सिमर कै गुरु नानक लई त्याए, फिर अंगद गुरु ते अमरदास रामदास हुए सहाय। अर्जन हर गोबिंद नो सिमरो श्री हर राय, श्री हर कृष्ण ध्याइए जिस डिठे सब दुख जाए। तेग बहादुर सिमरै कर नौनिध आवे ताएं, सब थाई हुए सहाय। 10वें पातशाह श्री गुरु गोबिंद सिंह साहिब जी सब थाई हुए सहाय। 10 पातशाहियां दी जोत श्री गुरु ग्रंथ साहिब जी दे पाठ दीदार दा ध्यान करके बोलो जी। पंजा प्यारियां चौहां साहिबजादियां, 40 मुक्तियां हठियां जपियां तपियां, जिन्हां नाम जपिया वण छकिया, देख चलाई तेग वाही, देख के अंडिठ कीता। तिन्हां प्यारियां सचियारियां दी कमाई दा ध्यान करके खालसा जी बोलो जी। जिन्हां सिंगां सिंगणियां ने धर्म हेत सीस दिते, बंद बंद कटाए, खोपड़ियां लुहाइयां, चरखड़ियां ते चढ़े, आरियां नाल चिराए गए, गुरुद्वारियां दी सेवा लई कुर्बानियां कीतियां। धर्म नहीं हारिया, सिੱਖੀ केसां स्वासां नाल निभाई। तिन्हां दी कमाई दा ध्यान करके खालसा जी बोलो जी। पंजां तख्तां सरबत गुरुद्वारियां दा ध्यान करके बोलो जी। प्रथमे सरबत खालसा जी की अरदास है जी। सरबत खालसा जी को वाहिगुरु 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 चितावे, चितावन का सदका सर्व सुख होवे। जहाँ जहाँ खालसा जी साहिब, तहाँ तहाँ रछया रियायत। देख देख फतेह बिरद की पैज, पंथ की जीत। श्री साहिब जी सहाय, खालसा जी के बोलबाले बोलो जी। सिखां नूं सिੱਖੀ दान, केस दान, रहत दान, विवेक दान, विसाह दान, भरोसा दान, दाना सिरदान नाम दान। श्री अमृतसर जी दे इशनान, चौंकियां झंडे बुंगे, जुगो जुग अटल धर्म का जयकार बोलो जी। सिखां दा मन नीवा, मत उच्ची, मत दा राखा आप वाहिगुरु। हे अकाल पुरख, अपने पंथ दे सदा सहाय दा तार जियो। श्री ननकाना साहिब अते होर गुरुद्वारियां गुरधामां जिन्हां तो पंथ नूं विछोड़िया गया है, खुले दर्शन दीदार ते सेवा संभाल दा दान खालसा जी नूं बख्शो। हे निमाणियां दे माण, निताणियां दे ताण, नियोटियां दी ओट, सच्चे पिता वाहिगुरु जी। आप जी दे हजूर अरदास बेनती है जी। अज असी आप जी दे बच्चे आज़ाद अकाल तख्त दी लहर दे विषय ते विचार विटांदरा करन इकट्ठे होए हां। सो जी बख्शो, अपनी निजी स्वार्थां तो ऊपर उठ के पंथ की जीत, कौमी एकता ते सरबत दे भले नूं मुख रखण दी बलबुद्धि बख्शो जी। अखर वादा घाटा भुल चुक माफ करनी, सरबत दे कारज रास करने। सही प्यारे मेल जिन्ना मिलिया तेरा नाम चितावे, नानक नाम चढ़दी कला, तेरे भाणे सरबत दा भला। वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। बोले सो निहाल। वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की
वाहिगुरु जी का खालसा, वाहिगुरु जी की फतेह। Can you all hear me okay? If people in the back kind of want to be able to move up forward too, and if you want to concentrate yourself in the center, then you might be able to get better air movement. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Sangeeta Kaur, and I will be the moderator for this session here today that we're having on this town hall of the Free Akal Takht. And just to review a little bit of what we are doing here today, I think those of us that are sitting here in the Sangha today are all aware that the Akal Takht and the decisions of the Akal Takht decrees affect Sikhs globally. But we have had some significant breakdowns in our institutional process such that the voice of the collective 30 million Sikhs globally are not represented and not heard in the decisions that are being made. Over time, this has caused all of us, I think, to some extent, to become and feel separated from our institutions as they stand, and we feel disconnected from the very community that Sikhi had instilled in us to keep. The Free Akal Takht movement is aiming to free the Akal Takht from political interference and reclaim its state of social, economic, political, and spiritual sovereignty. And to discuss the details of this and its aims to create a structure of governance for collective decision-making, we are very excited to have Harinder Singh here today, as well as Bhajanpreet Singh. Bhajanpreet Singh is one of our local sevadars in the Metro Detroit area who has been active with the Free Akal Takht in their online platform developments. And he will talk a little bit about that, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. But Harinder Singh is also here today, and he is a widely respected activist and educator that some of you may have known from the past. He currently serves as an organizer of the Free Akal Takht, and prior to joining Free Akal Takht, he had co-founded the Sikh Research Institute, the Punjab Digital Library, and he has served on numerous boards, some of which are the National Conference on Community and Justice, the Fellowship of Activists to Embrace Humanity, and the Nanak Shahi Trust. He is an author, speaker, and educator, and I think what he will discuss and describe with you today will be very informational for all of us. Before we have Harinder Virji come up, just to review with you the sequence of events over the next hour and a half to hour and 45 minutes or so. Harinder Virji will kind of do an overview for you about the Free Akal Takht and the Sarvat Khalsa form of governance. That will be about 40 minutes, and then this will be followed by a 20-minute session led by Bhajanpreet Singh on what the online platform is to connect Sikhs globally, and we will do a sample polling for the summit that's gathered here today. After that, and that will be about 20 minutes, we will do then a 30-minute Q&A session. The question and answer session will be somewhat structured so that everybody gets a chance to ask questions who would like. We have mics set up on both sides, so if you have a question that you would like or a comment that you'd like to make in that session, please line up at the mics. I will respectfully ask that you keep your comments and questions to about 30 seconds, and there will be about 2 minutes for response. And we'll kind of review those rules again when we get to the question and answer session. But that will be about 30 minutes, and then we'll conclude with what our polling results were for our small gathering here today, and get you all on your way, okay? So without further ado, I'd like to invite Harinder Singh to come to the stage, and he'll take it from here. Oh, and one other thing, I do want to just thank everybody for making the effort to come here on a Saturday morning and weaving your way through all the parking in downtown Detroit. It's really exciting, actually, to see our local community and all of the different gurdwaras and sangats that we go to kind of come together to really discuss and think about some of these very issues that are pressing.
Can you guys hear me? Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and good morning. Since we had Ardas, Hukum this morning from Darbar Sahib in Amritsar, I usually have a personal practice and I pick a line to see what it's telling me to do today. And the line I had picked from Jat Sri Ki War this morning was Maila Manjuwan, so it's two Arjun Padshahs. It basically said, the word used was Pratap and Govind. So Swarnam, Pratap, Govind. Swarna is to listen. So those who are actually listening, and you know the difference between listening and hearing, we all hear all sorts of things. But jehde wakai sun rahe ne, Sun Pratap Govind. Pratap you can say is something like greatness or a glory. What happens? What's the effect of that? And the effect is the next three words, and it says, Nirpau Pai Man. That Nirpau is fearlessness, Pai is occurs or becomes, and Man is mind. And it's written in a plural sense, and basically becomes those who are really listening to Govind is, Go is earth. Wind is the creative potency force. So the earth force, I don't like to use the word God or Vaheguru for every translation because then we don't get to hear the infiniteness of the divine. So here it's actually saying those who really listen to the earth forces glory, their minds become fearless. Now I like everything in Guru Granth Sahib, but this one is even more pertinent today to talk about it, because even somebody from the audience came up to me and says, thank you for doing this, for being a brave soul. And I was thinking, I know what he meant, but I was thinking none of us are really brave. Or you can say all of us are brave. The question is, what is your mind listening to? So one of the larger theses in Gurbani is that if you're really listening, like in Japji Sahib it says, Sunaya, pohna sakya kaal. Those who are listening, unna nu ta deathlessness, fearlessness, touch bhi nahi kar sakdi. Which means, what are we really listening to then? Which means every Sikh is supposed to be fearless, because the divine we believe in is fearless. So fearlessness is another training. It's a training of the mind again. And those minds who get trained, they become fearless. And we all are fearless at certain instances in our lives. But the idea in Gurbani is to train us such that that becomes the constant behavior. So those who did that, we're going to briefly touch upon how they established and re-established and defended and rebuilt Akal Takht. And the whole idea was, those who did it, why were they doing it? And so quickly, for first half of it, I'm going to do, just so all of us can be on the same page, a bit of a history. What are the fundamentals to have this conversation, which essentially is to do with Gurbani and history. A little bit about explaining those fundamentals in today's context of Akal Takht and Sarbat Khalsa. मैं इंग्लिश पंजाबी को मिक्स कराना मैंने क्या किया सीगा कि दोनों लैंग्वेजेस यूज कर दिया मैं so please don't mind that because this is to cater to 85% ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਲਈ and then this dialogue all of a sudden ਜਿਹੜਾ 2015 ਵਿੱਚ 10 ਨਵੰਬਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਂ ਤੇ how do we contextualize this in history how is that relevant to you and me ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ ਬੈਠੇ ਆ 30 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਹੈਗੇ 3 ਕਰੋੜ ਸਿੱਖ ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ 'ਚ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ 3 ਕਰੋੜ ਸਿੱਖ ਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਸਾਰੀ ਗੱਲ relevant ਹੈ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਰੋਲ ਆ and don't say ਮੇਰਾ ਕੋਈ ਰੋਲ ਨਹੀਂ because this is the election year in American politics. Let's make it relevant. All of us are not aligned to Bernie Sanders or Hillary or Trump, but we all have opinions. Because it is going to affect all of us. Whoever becomes the nominee or eventual winners. Now we have the 2 nominees. So some people become activists. Some people comment. Some people get in the field. Some people, are pundits on MSNBC and fix news. And that's what I call Fox News. So the point is, people have different roles. Similarly, and once there's the election, there's going to be a winner. So ਜਿਹੜੇ winners ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, the flexible election, whatever you want to call it, ਸਾਡੇ culture ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ culture ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਆ ਰਹੀ that people who govern, they govern everyone, not just the ones who voted for them. And this is another thing we have to understand. 3 million, 3 ਕਰੋੜ ਸਿੱਖ ਵਸਦਾ ਪੂਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿ ਸੇਮ 35 ਤੋਂ 100 ਬੰਦੇ ਹੀ ਗਵਰਨ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸਾ 32 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ 30 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਰਨ ਕਰਨਗੇ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਿਰਫ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੀ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਨੇ ਵਾਟ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਾਕੀ ਕਿਸਮਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਦੇਖਣ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਨੇ ਬਟ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਆਇਡੈਂਟੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਐਜ਼ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਨੇ ਬੜੇ ਗੰਭੀਰ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਚਰਚਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਘੱਟ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ because at the end of the day this is not just about who's the president it is about that too but it is more about कि जरा भी कोई आ जाएगा कोई system जो होगा then what are they governing for and that's the kind of conversation we want to do today fundamentals ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ मैं quickly ਇਹਨੂੰ run ਕਰਾਂਗਾ just as a so we are on the same page our presumption primarily based on Guru Granth Sahib is कि all the gurus were one this is challenged in the books this is challenged by authors this is challenged प्रचारक भी बड़ा कुछ किया जाते हैं कई बारी but ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ thesis ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ according to Guru Granth Sahib totally ਗਲਤ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਫੇਵਰਿਟ ਗੁਰੂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਮੇਰੇ ਫੇਵਰਿਟ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਲੀ ਵਾਲੇ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਹਰਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨ ਸਾਹਿਬ 3HO ਵਾਲੇ ਨੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਰਾਮਦਾਸ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖਾੜਕੂ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਹਰਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਹੈ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ all this is not a Sikh thesis ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੜਾ ਕਲੀਅਰਲੀ ਆਇਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜੋਤ ਆ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜੁਗਤ ਆ the wisdom of the gurus and the methodology of the gurus was exactly same the only thing different was their body ਕਾਇਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਪਲਟੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਪਲਟੀ ਵਿੱਚ changed ਜੋਤ ਤੇ ਜੁਗਤ were exactly same so that is assumption we operated ਸਾਰੇ gurus same ਸੀਗੇ ਉਹ ਗੁਰੂਆਂ ਨੇ ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦਿੱਤਾ you can't say any of that system was a mistake then So institution building ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ systems ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ institution building ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿ ਹਰੇਕ ਗੁਰੂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ institution develop ਕੀਤਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ blueprint ਬਣਾਇਆ ਉਸ blueprint ਦੇ ਆਧਾਰ ਤੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਗੁਰੂਆਂ ਨੇ ਕੋਈ institution ਦਿੱਤੇ ਉਸ institution ਵਿੱਚੋਂ eventually ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੇ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਪੰਥ ਆਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਉਹ ਨਿਕਲਿਆ ਰਾਈਟ ਉਹ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਐਂਡ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਆਰ ਮਾਡਲ ਉਹ ਇੰਸਟੀਟਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਿਰ ਇਹ ਵਰਡਸ ਨੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਰੇ ਅੱਜ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਥੋੜੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਚਰਚਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਅਦਰਵਾਈਜ਼ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਿਰਫ ਗੁਰਪੁਰਬਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਰਡ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਸੀ ਬਟ ਆਫਟਰ ਲਾਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਆਫਟਰ 30 years last November these phrases are all of a sudden back in our minds Akal, Takht Sahib, Sarvat Khalsa, Panj Pyare, even more phrases, Jathedars and other things are coming into our minds. So we need to talk about all this. But the assumption is all the gurus are one. Guru ekko hi hai. Guru diya manifestations hagiyan ne, but Guru ekko hi hai. Which basically means ki Guru karan ki aaya si mere starti the. It is a contested issue. Mostly people will tell you ki Guru Nanak Sahib ne dharm shuru kita. In Guru Granth Sahib, nowhere it says ki Guru Nanak Sahib ne dharm shuru kita. It does say in Satya Balwant Zawar ki Raj shuru kita. This is very different idea because I am primarily basing it on Guru Granth Sahib and then some secondary traditions. Raj word is indigenous term. Raj na minimum meaning hunda system of governance. If you extrapolate it on the highest level, it also means the republic. You know, nation state, जिनको countries भी आते हैं. And actually, this clearly says Nanak Raj chalaya, such quote Satani neem pe. कि ट्रूथ दी फाउंडेशंस दे उत्ते एक किला उसारिया गया उस किले दी बड़ी बुनियाद वो गुरु नानक साहब ने शुरू कराई सी एंड व्हाट इज राज देन राज जस्ट लाइक बैक देन एंड जस्ट लाइक टुडे इट्स ऑलवेज अबाउट इकोनॉमिक्स एंड पॉलिटिक्स इकोनॉमिक राइट्स एंड पॉलिटिकल राइट्स ऑलवेज टुडे even with the difference in philosophies in American elections what eventually is it कि पैसे इकट्ठे किਵੇਂ करने ने ते पैसे खर्चने किथे ने That's what the fight is at the end of the day. And second is, who's allowed to participate in that? Even today, that's what the fight is. That's why there's a voter separation. Guru Nanak Sahib ਵੇਲੇ ਵੀ ਇਹੀ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਸਾ ਕੀ ਵਾਰ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਧਿਆਨ ਨਾਲ ਅਗਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਸ਼ਲੋਕ ਦੀ ਲਾਈਨ ਦੇਖਿਓ ਗਊ ਬ੍ਰਾਹਮਣ ਕੋ ਕਰ ਲਾਓ ਕਰ is a tax. He was talking about ਕਿ tax ਜਿਹੜਾ unnecessary ਦੇਣਾ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ to certain religious minorities. It's always about, always, when it comes to governance, economic and political rights. And that's what he's talking about कि Guru Nanak Sahib ने एक नवा system शुरू किया सीगा where he's providing a blueprint to the world on how. So this is like we should be, you know how we study Plato's Republic and we talk about Nietzsche's idea and we talk about the philosophers and political scientists and religious ideologies. Guru Granth Sahib को करना spiritual level पे देखना उसे छोटा करना. जेडी चीज पूरा होती है ना होती है perfect. पूरा का मतलब life ਦੀ ਹਰ dimension ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਊਗੀ and that dimension is being talked about in Guru Granth Sahib ਇਸ ਕੰਮ ਲਈ ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਲੈਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਗੁਰੂ ਅਮਰਦਾਸ ਗੁਰੂ ਅੰਗਦ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ and then you know the Shabad details. The point here is uncontestable stuff among Sikhs is Guru Granth Sahib. In Guru Granth Sahib it's very clear Guru Nanak Sahib started a new way to rule and the way to rule is what is your economic and political. Nobody is going to put gun to your head, you know this कि ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿੰਨੇ ਵਜੇ ਉੱਠ ਕੇ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਠ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ जिन्हें मर्जी बड़ी उठी हो but you start becoming politically active just like Guru Arjan did just like Guru Nanak did people have issues and that's what Jahangir said at the time this is what they say now okay now long quotes I'm going to skip over it there is enough evidence by Sikh authors non-Sikh authors British government agents I say that because at the end of the day there are always at least two versions of history what is the imperial power of the time writing about you and what are your own indigenous people writing. This is not contested in the Sikh writings of 18th century, 16th century, or even 20th century. That what were Gurus up to? Bada clearly established किया गया Sikh writers ने, non-Sikh writers ने. In fact, the writer which is not written here, but he's very famous, Gokul Chand Narang. He has a book called Transformation of Sikhism. I like the phrase he used. He basically said the steel of Guru Gobind Singh's sword was provided by Guru Nanak. Even he understood that. The guy who is credited to create part of Bengali nationalism, which became Indian nationalism, even they understood it very clearly, what were Gurus up to. This is one of the reasons they don't like to present Gurus properly, but they understood that. Okay. Now, out of this Sikh system of governance, which I'm going to keep calling Raj the name of governance se le aa rahe hain, because when we want minimum understanding, you come to the common minimum program. Everyone might not agree on the nation state, But at minimum, we can agree Raj means system of governance. So system of governance which Guru Granth and Guru Panth become the central figures for us, central institutions. Guru Granth Sahib के बारे में कुछ बड़ी कहने की लोड़ नहीं, but एक गल जरूर कहूँगा, एक गल ख्याल रखियो, and more about this tomorrow at Gurdwara where I speak. But Guru Arjan is the one who gifted us with this. I don't think we understand how powerful it is, because when he released his manifesto, I'm using political words on purpose. The religious leaders of the time and the political leaders of the time, including his family members, were so upset that he was killed for it. We use the term martyrdom, politically he was killed. I don't think we have understood what's Guru Granth Sahib. This will be like open sourcing of, the IT people who understand these things. He open sourced whatever religiosity meant. He's like, nobody has a copyright, no more secrecy, I want it out in open. So this is a question all of you should think about. Why was he killed? What was he doing? Okay. The Panth idea, and Sikh Health Maryada, the Puran Singh Ji quotes and the Panth part is very simple as well. We can have all the debates on it. It is very clearly established and codified, as well as in history, that Panth essentially was a short term for Guru Khalsa. Panth is the phrase, which essentially means the representatives of the Guru who were committed and given allegiance to the Guru Granth Sahib as a foremost authority in their lives. So basically, Amrit used to be that ceremony. Nobody presents Amrit in this slide anymore. Amrit has been, that's not a topic on Amrit today, but Amrit actually was an initiation ceremony. It's like becoming a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. I say that because that's a very strong term. Taking Amrit used to mean this. You are not hiding, you are out in the open. What do you stand for? What is your worldview? And according to that worldview, you will work for economic and political rights. That became Guru Granth and Panth, and what came out of this was long explanations. I'm just going to skip over them. If you have a system of development, which by the way is not an evolution, evolution implies something changed. So the term Sikh authors never use the term evolution. Non-Sikh authors have used that term, so we have to be a bit careful. Sikh authors like Ganda Singh and Teja Singh use terms like growth of responsibility. Because when a system, a movement, a revolution is coming around, you have building blocks. And at one point, a building block became Takht. The idea of Takht is Guru Amardas Sahib. You guys read this. Those of you who are into Kirtan, one of the most famous chowkis. At the end of that, we say, Sacha Tidva Darar Vadapul Takht. So idea comes of the Takht. The idea of code is Guru Nanak's, which is, code means killa. And then physical manifestation was done by Guru Har Gobind Sahib. And only thing I can say here is, back then the two political powers were Delhi and Lahore. Just imagine setting up something parallel today. I don't think we can even dream what that means anymore. I don't think we have an idea of what Guru Har Gobind Sahib's vision of Akal Takht was. This was being a parallel, a watchdog, including when you had a Sikh state, this was still independent, such that they could call, and it's basically like Vatican-like force today, which is independent of nations. So even when there was a Sikh nation, a physical kingdom of Punjab, whether it was Sikh or not, that's a debatable issue. But even when it was there, Akal Takht used to be independent. So this was a parallel authority to Lahore and Delhi. South Asian powers, they parallel see. If you understand that, and then development part I'm going to skip. It's just not like, there's all sorts of trainings you go through. You need to train your people mentally. It's Shabad. Shabadi training is essential. Anyone who discounts that, I will humbly submit, is not in the thesis of Sikhi. Anyone who has done things for Sikhi has been born out of Shabad. In fact, I will contest to you, today we are in trouble because things are not born out of Shabad. That's what Manmat is. When we start our answer with, I think we should do this, literally that's Manmat. Gurmat is when you are saying, let's deliberate on what is Guru saying about this. Some of you are becoming lawyers, you will know this. This is what you're supposed to do. There could be a disagreement on interpretation, but you cannot say you're not going to follow the Constitution. Today when we make decisions, the largest level of decisions in our path to the local decisions, rarely do we invoke Shabad. That should tell you how screwed up things are. So Shabad's training, whether it was language, whether it was music, it was all about, if you want to be a constitutional lawyer in this country, you got at least 8 years of training, right? Study the training in Hindi and we all feel we are qualified to make one decision. Then you know what happens? What just happened last week, where you have the alternative Jathedars apologizing because they didn't deliberate, they didn't think what they were saying, and they created more trouble. This is what's going on today. It's right in front of us, and what's happening in front of gurus as well. Okay. Sangat development, you guys know this. Manji developments, which were the zones. You can call them the United States of South Asia at the time, if that's what you want to think. Because United States of America wasn't United States of America, it was a gradual, it started with 13 colonies. We can say we started with 22 Manjis. We eventually consolidated into 12 missiles. You know, things. So there is change. There is always a change because the political realities are based on what is happening at that time in those realities. Sangat supremacy idea is there. I'm going to just quickly over it. You know the word Khalsa, generally we associate with Guru Gobind Singh Maharaj. Yes, he did institutionalize it, but the word was in existence and very well documented by the time 6th Guru came about. Same time at Akal Takht, because one of the things you will notice in Sikh doctrines and Sikh history is that the organizational words in Sikhi are Persian-Arabic because they were more organized. The more theological ideas are more Indic, which are Upfrench and Sanskrit-based ideas. And that's what you'll see in Gurbani as well. So Khalsa, politically speaking, was a word before being even invoked in Sikhi as an institution. The word was something which belonged directly to the sovereign. So land usually meant land or people. Now think about that idea. Guru Har Gobind Singh Maharaj started to use this term. Other gurus started to do it. Akal Takht Sahib is physically built. You know this, the idea was developed by several gurus. And let's mention Bibi Pani ji because we forget to mention those things. Miri Piri idea, yes, the physical manifestation, you know. Let's break it down. I like to simplify things. Miri simply means Mir, it comes from Mir. Mir is a political head. Mir literally is a prince. Piri, Pir is a spirituality. Now we mince our words. It means, what are the words we like to say? Nobody says spiritual and political activism anymore. What do we say? Temporal. Then you have to look up in a dictionary which biblical idea is this. We mince our words. Remember, Gurbani was about everyday people, which means simplify it, keep it simple, tell the people what it means. Miri Piri, the word Mir and Pir were the first time in the history of the Sikhs was used by Guru Nanak Sahib himself. He has a Shabad. Remember, everything is Guru Nanak. Other gurus are building institutions. Shabad in Guru Granth Sahib is, he uses this, he invokes it, he says, Koti hu Pir varj raha hai, ja Mir sunyat aaya. Where are all those spiritualists? This is how he talks. This is real Guru Nanak for us in Guru Granth Sahib. Koti is several, many. Koti hu Pir varj raha hai, ja Mir sunyat aaya. Where are all those spiritualists when the prince attacked? How come they're not showing their magic that day? Those are the next following lines. And you'll see spiritualists have this fascination. They like to do, they're more godmen in India than anywhere else, and they have multi-crore trusts under their names. And this is what Guru Nanak was witnessing. He's like, what the hell is this? Contemporary way of saying it, right? He didn't use that word. But the point is, that's what he's saying. He's like, I want to show your magic today. So show me your magic today, if you really have it. So what he's saying, Guru Nanak Sahib, is people who are just spiritual and just political, they are the ones who actually conspire with each other to control the masses. So, Miri Piri idea, hyphenated words, and physical embodiment comes. Essentially, I don't know if we can even visualize that Akal Takht had become the headquarters for the Panth. Now what does it mean? Yeah, it's a political word. Takht is political. How can we say it's not political? Takht means throne. Akal means timeless or deathless, which means, it's very interesting. I'm going to raise this question, and I know we have Jathedars now. Can you even have a Jathedar ideologically of the Akal Takht? Jathedar used to be of Jatha. Even today in Punjabi we say this, ki pada Jathedar kona. I know there are issues, so I want to bring up issues, then we'll come to some solutions what we can do about it. This is why there never used to be in Guru period a Jathedar of Akal Takht. We had needs, so we developed them. There are some legal issues in the last 100 years, how the terminologies and other things got mixed in. All I'm saying is, Darbar Sahib is open to all. Akal Takht wasn't open to all. Even if you read Sikh Dharma carefully, this is, if you have not given allegiance to the Guru system, then this is not your Takht. The Akal Takht is political. The very name is political. It is for those who have given allegiance. It's like saying, you know what, I want to become, whatever, president of a Catholic church, but I am not ready to say I'm Catholic. Well, then you can't be that, right? So there are some criteria which are developed. This is a system of governance. And that governance just realized Akal Takht is that. It is our headquarter. What kind of headquarter is it? Well, those are the questions we should ask. Is it a military headquarter? Is it, like the terms we use today are judicial in American system, for example. We call them executive, legislative, judiciary. But there's also military, right? Is it our Pentagon? Well, that's the kind of stuff we should be talking about if we have to re-envision what Akal means today. So, physical space, because these are the issues coming up. Does the Sabat Khalsa have to be at Akal Takht every time? Well, let's go over to Guru period. Guru Har Gobind Singh Maharaj set up several. You realize that in Sikhi, there is no idea or concept of sacred space. Jithe marji baith ke assi Rabb nu yaad kar sakde hain. But you need a place of assembly. But we are not married to that place of assembly. And Guru Har Gobind Singh himself had done it, where he had actually multiple places which were called Takht, Kodgarh Sahib at Kiratpur, Akal Bunga Nanandpur Sahib. Banda Bahadur period never did any deliberations there, so he had Muktasar. But Harmandir Sahib complex, I like to call it Harmandir Sahib and Akal Takht Sahib complex, which actually has multiple gurdwaras. That complex has a special place in Sikh psyche because of what happened there primarily in 18th century. Okay, so again there is no contestation, including Dr. McLeod used to agree. Eventually we would say, okay, so what if the Khalsa changed certain traditions? Isn't Khalsa empowered to if it's a governing authority? And then his answer used to be yes. So my point is, nobody contests, even academically, those who are not considered even the friends of the Sikhs, even they agreed that the sovereignty was granted to the Khalsa. Which means, sovereignty means who are the people who were given the authority to make decisions on behalf of the Panth. And that used to mean that the Khalsa was given that. But within that Khalsa, I want to talk about Panj Pyare quickly. Only thing I want to say here is, Panj is 5, all of you know this. Pyare means lovers. Okay? Not beloved. Beloved is the Guru. If you are into literature, you will know the difference. We have actually stopped calling them 5 lovers. I mean, think about it. As soon as you say lovers, what do you think is the first qualification? Is the love pouring out of them? We are not looking for 5 fighters. The lover will be a fighter, but that fighter will never be called a fighter. That's why the word warrior exists. Right? Essential qualification is a lover. Somebody who's in love. Everything else is secondary. And Guru Gobind Singh used that phrase. So let's just figure it out. Who are the lovers who should be representing us? It cannot be the single individual, even if that individual is the best. And the first thing should be, are they operating in love? Or are they operating in some other systems? And I think this will answer a lot of the things in terms of selections, elections, other things. The idea of Panj is clear in Gurbani, not going to go into too much detail, but essentially the idea of Panch and Panj, which means supreme, to best, to the physical 5, all the ideas have been discussed in Guru Granth Sahib. All I'm trying to say is, institution building in Sikhi was based out of Gurbani. Anything which is not reflected in Gurbani, it doesn't last with Sikhs. Even though there have been so many attacks against Sikh institutions, at least it still exists in our psyche because it is born out of Gurbani's ideas. And this is something we should celebrate. This is why since 1995, they don't try to demolish Akal Takht anymore physically. Now they demolish it in their minds. They ridicule it now. They make sure you don't have any allegiances to it. They make sure you're always talking about how things sucks there. All that is true. But this is the first time in the history of the Sikhs in the last 500 plus years that we, people at large, those who consider themselves to be Sikhs, are actually demolishing Akal Takht in their minds. And this is the most dangerous thing. We have never worried about being physical demolitions. We have built them and rebuilt them. But this is something we have to think about. Okay, 5 generals, the idea of 5 has been there, that's what the point was here. Authority of the Panj is clear, you guys know this, even Banda Bahadur had 5. I want to just quickly talk about, when we talk about Jathedars, we do need to understand our system is not of dictatorship, and our system is not of kingship. It's very clear in Sikhi. If you look at the term in Guru Granth Sahib, the word leadership equivalent is Agu. Not a single time it's used in Maj Ki War or anywhere else in Guru Granth Sahib in a positive way. This is our system. Agu is not used positively at all in Gurbani. Right? So it should tell you that we are the decentralized people, we are not the authoritative people. So the terms we have to look at, they're very important. What terms we use because behind the term is a connotation. We have psychiatrists sitting here who can tell you that everything matters, and lawyers are sitting here in training. They'll also tell you the semantics matter because that's what wins the cases. So it's so important to understand our terms. This is why, yes, Ranjit Singh is a great monarchical model for South Asia, but that's not a Sikh model. We never believed in it. This is where part of our other problems occurred. Okay, so continuing on with, sort of mentioned this is where Banda Singh Bahadur had this list for, okay, let's come to Sarbat Khalsa term itself. Alright, in history what we were trying to establish so far was, all the gurus are same, according to Guru Granth Sahib. Institutions every guru built, that's why it's built out of Gurbani's ideas, started from Guru Nanak. And those institutions, even in their most declined implementable stages, still have a particular space in Sikh psyche. Sarbat Khalsa now is the term, indigenous term for what we now call parliaments. That's how you have to think about it. Parliaments everywhere are different. Even in monarchical system, it's different. You know, if you look at Richard VIII or Henry VIII, the way he did things in England, when he split from Catholic Church and created Church of England, to how even certain Norwegian countries operate today, to how Canadian Parliament is, how Indian Parliament is, it's some representation system. Sarbat Khalsa is our representation system. I want to use more indigenous terms because when you say parliament, it has different connotation, which is elections. Sarbat Khalsa never used to be there, but there was a democratization from a representation angle. Just so, you know, sometimes these words we are not, in America, by the way, you know, with election year, there's whole talk about, you know, the way we select our candidates, is this really fair? It's not. Because, you know what, I don't know how many of you realize America is not a democracy. America is a republic. So, you know, we have these words we like to use freely. You actually don't matter anymore. Supreme Court even is saying the corporation has more power than you to decide who's going to be the candidate because they get to spend more money than you ever can. My whole point is these words are loaded. They don't mean what we generally think they mean. And even in America, it's not a democracy. Technically, it's a republic, which means they don't directly select who's going to be a representative. That said, come back to Sikhi for a second. Sarbat Khalsa is our term. It's साडा तरीका हैगा कि साडे representatives कौन होंगे. पंज दा idea clear हैगा. You need, the decision cannot be by 500, you know this. 500 may be the legislative body. Can you imagine a 500 judiciary? Can you imagine a Pentagon with 500 leadership? You see how it works? It works on the decision making for what purpose. Legislative decisions require more people. Implementation decisions, like sea levels, require less people, implementation decisions. And those are the kind of things we have to think about. Sarbat Khalsa is back in the news in last year, and essentially what Sarbat Khalsa means is what we are trying to now revive. Sarbat Khalsa na, most dimaga mein Sarbat Khalsa da matlab hai banaya hoya कि जेड़े मेरे किस्म के बंदे ने मैंने उन्होंने इकट्ठे कर लो ते बोले सोने हाथ करा के अपना जब ऐसे लोकल गुरुद्वारे में होते हैं consensus building is not when you gather your own kind and say बोले सोने हाथ and it's done. No, that's called hijacking and manipulation. Let's be honest about it. Consensus building is कि जब तक विचार ही नहीं हुई, deliberation ही नहीं हुई, open process नहीं होया, जिथे तुसी जिन्हां नूं नहीं पसंद करते, जिन्हें जेड़े तुहाडे opposition च ने, another word which is important. Sikhs cannot use the word enemies. Now we openly use this against each other. Opposition is the healthy term. We have opposing viewpoints. It's okay to have them. That doesn't mean one is my enemy. If you're using those terms, you're becoming the new Tea Party of Sikhs. I mean, you can't use those terms. Sikhan ne to nahi dassya, mere paunirwar da matlab ta sanu bilkul hi samajh nahi aa sakda. So we have oppositional viewpoints. And when you sit with people who are in opposing views, and you say our constitution manifesto is Guru Granth Sahib, in its slide, let's deliberate and let's make it open as possible, the process, and as diverse as possible. All that decision hunda si Sarbat Khalsa. Now, Sarbat Khalsa is a developing process too. You know, the American democracy in its first inaugural day wasn't selected by people either. Upon they were like, no, ekdam hi sab kuch theek ho jata, kuch nahi ekdam theek hunda. I mean, Nobody likes to read anymore. Maybe you can watch that 7-part HBO series on John Adams and see what it takes to set up a republic. You know, how you have to work to make sure some people don't show up if they oppose you to vote that day. And how even the best men don't allow certain things within them to do the right thing, like Benjamin Franklin not allowing Jefferson to even write a declaration to include black and women. Because in his first draft, he did include pro-care freedom. It took another 200 years. My point is, when people are making decisions, they're not the perfect decision, but over time, it builds on it. Look at this country, it's taken, what, women's suffrage movement was 100 years ago, and for the first time they have a nominee. Whether you like the candidate or not is not the point. Point is, it takes time. A lot of things take time. Okay, so this used to be the process. If you want to use the word democracy, Sabbath Khalsa is essentially Gurmat-based democracy. Gurmat-based democracy, Punjabi ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਨੇ, ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਈ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਨਵੋਲਵ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਯੂ نو ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਇਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, ਐਸਜੀਪੀਸੀ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਹੋਣਗੇ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਦ ਦਾ ਇੰਟਰੋਡਕਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਵੋਟ ਆਇਆ ਨਾ, ਜਦ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਬਰਦਸਤ ਵਧੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। I'm not anti-vote. But we have to understand, it's like, can you imagine Catholic Church having a vote as to decide every member? It doesn't happen anywhere. There are so many places where this system doesn't work. All I want to say is, actually, where is my Institute of Sikh Studies, the annual meeting they get. It used to be a great organization, completely screwed up by people who were implanted in there to kill it completely. It was founded by Sardar Kapoor Singh, Sardar Daljit Singh, and Sardar Jagjeet Singh as a watchdog Sikh organization in Chandigarh. And I've seen it in front of my eyes in 96 and 97 and 98 while I was there, how it was completely demolished and filled with the retired bureaucrats and generals and brigadiers, make sure no author existed there, and they have completely derailed the organization. Systematically. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਐਨੂਅਲ ਮੀਟਿੰਗ ਤੇ ਗਿਆ, because I wasn't a member, I stepped out after the discussion when they were voting. ਬਾਹਰ ਨਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੱਕ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗ ਆ ਗਏ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਾਕਾ ਇਹ ਅੰਦਰ ਕੀ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ? ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੱਸੋ। Because sometimes ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਾਸੋਹੀਣੀ ਗੱਲ ਵੀ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਠੀਕ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। I like those phraseologies. ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਾਕਾ ਇਹ ਅੰਦਰ ਪਤਾ ਕੀ ਹੈ? ਇੱਥੇ ਹੁਣ 49 ਗਧੇ ਇਕੱਠੇ ਹੋ ਕੇ ਇੱਕ ਸ਼ੇਰ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿਣਗੇ ਤੂੰ ਗਧਾ। So, and that happens. We call that majoritarianism, the tyranny of majority, and that's a risk in certain democracies. Okay, my point is we need to understand that our system is consensus-based. Consensus-based, it basically means it's the best decision you are willing to live with. Does not necessarily mean this is the best decision you would have liked. And this means you have no blocker. I mean, you can have blockers, but essentially this is a terminology we'll get into a little bit. Essentially what that means is you have garnered sarvasammati. Consensus building is sarvasammati. It always takes much longer, which means you cannot put every decision to be consensus building. Decisions which matter the most, and they have to explain what matters most. This sarvat khalsa hunda hi is kamli. Things which matter most. Utthe consensus building hundi si, and that consensus building used to be in the presence of Guru Granth Sahib. Whether it took 1 hour or 2 days, it didn't matter. It never was about ideological divisions among Sikhs. Never. Not a single incident between 1699 and 1805. Not a single Sarbat Khalsa was called to talk about doctrinal issue. Every single Sarbat Khalsa was about economic or political issues. We should be very clear on this. When you start discussing should we read Dasam Granth or not, eat meat or not, Ragmala or not, of course you're going to end up fighting because these are ideological issues. There are varieties of opinion. 100 years ago we had same opinions. 200 years ago people had same opinions. Sarbat Khalsa was about governance, remember? Governance is about economic and political rights. This is about what is a Sikh stand in today's world, and that's how we need to look at these things. Okay. If you want to read up on it, and some of you are very familiar with, there is not a great detailed document about how to conduct Sarbat Khalsa, but there is enough anecdotal evidence and historical evidence that it was conducted. And that's all I'll leave it at. Okay. So, mandates we have already talked about. Several Sarbat Khalsas happened, how the development occurred, how they ran in 18th century. And in 20th century, all I can say is there was an attempt in the vicinity in the 1925, especially after Jatto de Morche to Baad, but there was no Sarbat Khalsa. 86 there was one, Again, it was in the vicinity of what Sarbat Khalsa is supposed to be, but it's like, can you imagine showing up in Washington, D.C., where the Congress hasn't met for 32 years, and somehow they get together? What do you think will happen? Exactly. So why are we surprised when we don't have high expectations when the systems are not laid out? Just to meet is a defiance. Remember the whole history of defiance. Just to meet is a defiance. This is what used to happen in the Warsaw complex. This is the Shahadat of Paimani Singh. Tax, remember again tax, money collection, so they won't have a right to assemble freely. It's the same idea. 88, government outlawed it, they called one of their own. My point is, in 20th century, there were 2 meetings. Cannot say it's full Sarbat Khalsa, so we have to be talk about these things with integrity, right? But they're in the vicinity. They're trying to make it happen. Last year, the realities is, 2 organizations called it, several of them boycotted it. And was it really about them? Not really. It is about leadership crisis. Sarbat Khalsa was always about crisis. Now the question for us is, should we keep it only about crisis? I mean, there are 30 million of us now. Now we are not, 150 years ago, 99% of the Sikh population lived in 200 square miles. The difference between 1850 and 2016 is, now 80% lives in 200 square miles, 20% lives in the rest of the world. Earlier they were under one imperialistic force. Now we live in 186 countries, of which 25 countries' laws we are subjected to. From places like Indonesia, which is Islamic Republic, to places like America. So there are some serious things to be thought about here. How do we coexist with these? What should be our criteria? Things of that nature. So Ranjit Singh we have talked about. I talked about in 20th century there were examples. 86 there were examples. November 10th, 2015 happened. Yes, it is flawed. Yes, I can get into if you have questions about what really happened there. But 2 things I'll mention, and I'll mention the other places, and I'll move on to what we are up to. Number one thing is, the biggest success was, can you even imagine 500 to 600,000 people showing up anywhere? So next time when you talk about people of Punjab, please be very reserved. We like to dismiss them, they're very switched on. Don't dismiss them. They are the ones who have to live through the consequences. They are the ones जिन्होंने torturous body, Brian ने किताब लिखी है, चंगी तरह समझाया होया. My point is, it's not as simple and black and white as we like to make it, sitting here in diaspora in course. I know it's a Jewish terminology, but we now use it commonly. Yeah. So be very, very careful. People do know what is going on. They understand. Moti girls pretty clear that there was a violation of Guru Granth Sahib and there was a violation of Khalsa Panth. Isn't that what the Guru talked about? And because of that, they gathered. They didn't look at who's calling it. Everyone knows the history of the people who called it. It's not about them. So that was the biggest victory, even just to gather. Like छोटी जी concert बनी होगा ना कि मेरी Detroit में ही 50,000 बंदा इकट्ठा हो जाए वो फिर भी riot हो जाता छोटा मोटा. And it's and I'm sure if DGP Sani was the DGP that day, I'm sure he would have done something negative. So maybe something is to be thought about who's the current DGP and why he did what he did and why was he brought in. Anyway, other things to be considered. My point is, the biggest thing is 500 to 600 of those people coming in defiance, average villager, it's a big thing. And the biggest challenge, if you ask me, looking at what I was looking at in the internal meetings and the conductions they are doing from stage and other places, what I said earlier, there is no Shabbat, guys. People who are trying to do these things, I was basically told to shut up and let's talk about what we need to do when I know Shabbat. There is no Shabbat. Remember in the 5 lovers, there is nothing without the Shabbat. In Guru Granth Sahib is amply clear. Even when Guru Nanak is asked, what does he listen to? He says Shabbat. If you cannot invoke Shabbat, it's like, imagine US Congress or US Supreme Court or anyone invoking something in the name of America, violating and not citing the Constitution. This is the biggest challenge. And it's not just about them, this is our challenge too. Because whatever happens there is what is happening locally. Our lower courts are the same thing, which are the local gurdwaras. Our Supreme Court is there because lower courts are like this, which means you and I really need to think about what is going on. So, they called that there will be next one in April. It didn't happen, as you already know. We can get into it, why not. But this is going to be part of the game. Delay mechanism is everything, how things get done in India. They were supposed to start, I drafted the line, which included the deadline was November 30th. They removed that line that morning, they didn't even announce it. There's a lot of manipulation on the stage, in the meetings, with the government, with the jails, everything is part of the game. Who's arrested, who's presented, who's, all these things, it's a larger game. And we better figure out the game. Guru Nanak Sahib ne bhi tahan game khedni sikhai thi na, aap bhul gaye hain. He had 4 pointers. He says, I also want to play the game of love. Remember, prem di khedi hai na, khelna ka chao. It's the same vocabulary. They're always different games. Gurus went through, they saw the games which nations play, communities play, religious leaders play. It's the same stuff. So we better figure out how to play a different game. Anyway, this is what we are faced with now. I know Amrinder is missing and I know Badal is missing, but the point here is this is the new appropriation. You know how everything gets misappropriated or reappropriated? Now everyone carries kirpan. Now everyone wears the star. I understand symbolism behind it, but also understand manipulations behind it. I mean, kirpan to the ones who kill Sikhs. I mean, you can put Titler's photo there and other things there. But my point is, this is election year. Election year trumps everything in Punjab. And yes, AAP might be better for Punjab than other parties, but nobody is talking about Sikh issues. In their manifestos, there is no question. They're not even mention anything related to the Sikhs. But in their videos, which is politicking, everyone talks about it. Everyone sounds something. Amrinder Singh does it, Kejriwal does it, Badal does it. But not in their manifestos. And you know what gets implemented? What's in the manifesto. So if you, next time, whoever you're supporting, whoever you want to support, ask them, can you include one thing you will do for the Sikhs in Punjab? That's the kind of, because 53 to 57% still are Sikhs. Okay. Now, reason we are being manipulated because in 1921 they passed an act which is called, Gurdwara Act, shortly. And since then, everything is legally. The world we live in today, it's all about legally what happens. If you don't change things legally, the only other option is if there's an incredible, massive revolution, then you topple things. And we have not been able to produce that. So let's understand the game. The game is, since 1921, they created what's called SGPC. It's part which was created out of Gurdwara Act. Gurdwara Act, just so you know, people who freed Gurdwaras from Mahants and under the British, they were in jails. They agreed to this. People like Teja Singh Samundri Hall is named after him, they were against it. And this is how appropriation happens even within SGPC. So what they did, they named a building after him. Because Sikhs are not going to ask questions. They're like, changa banda si dekho ji. My point is, people were in jails who freed Gurdwaras. They agreed to a compromise as something to do now, but we need to be completely independent. And this was part of the condition for their prisoner release. This year earlier, there are a lot of prisoner releases. How many of you looked into the conditions of release? That's where the writing is. That's where the policies matter. Incredibly rare incidents happen in the history of the world where there are no conditions for prisoner releases. All I'm saying is those who are really interested, you have to look at those terms. You have to look at what is being compromised. Because it happened 100 years ago. Since then, a month ago, this parliament, without debate, without dialogue, made an amendment to the bill where they disenfranchised 93% of the Sikhs. So you are not allowed to vote anymore. Anyone who does their eyebrows is not allowed to vote. This is not about religiosity. This is purely about to make Sikhs look like ridiculous, regressive people. So only 7% people get to vote in Punjab. Who do you think is going to help now? Mr. Badal. This is complete legal. Can you imagine? This is like US Congress passing a definition of which Mormon can vote to decide who's their next chairman. That just happened a month ago in India. This is how things are manipulated. Home Minister, the same guy, to get the sympathies earlier called that 84 was a genocide. We welcome that remark. But it's the same guy who introduced the bill. And you know what they did right after that? Right after they never use the word karwapsi sikhane layi. Karwapsi is a term they use essentially to reconvert Christians, Muslims, and Jews back to Hindus. They passed this bill. They shrink the number of votes of Sikhs to literally 7% of the Sikhs. And very next day, there's an incident, several incidents, actually 3 major ones, one in Rajpura, one in Batala, I'm forgetting the third one. where they for the first time went after 6 ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਨਵਰਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਦੇਖੋ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਓ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਵਾਪਸ ਬਣਾਈਏ this just has started happening about a month ago. Whole point I'm trying to make is ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ legal manipulation ਹੈਗੀ ਆ. This is where this project started in January. Essentially what we did was we waited to see what Sabbath Khalsa people are going to do. They're not doing much. They're just playing games. You can see all the videos and the gameplays which comes out. I'm being very upfront about it. So we just picked up the 2 resolutions where there is agreement worldwide now. And the agreement is we need to have a Akal Takht without the interference of any government or any political party, including Sikh political parties. Because you know what the track record is? Since 1966, I use that time because that's became Punjabi Suba se badya si. ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਨੇ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਰੂਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੂੰ ਹੋਰ ਗੁਲਾਮ ਬਣਾਇਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਜ਼ਾਦ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀਤਾ so data is very clear it speaks volumes which is this is the reason why it needs to be freed from all political parties including Sikh political parties and second term is we need a global representation Sikh ਇੰਨੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ 'ਚ ਵਸਦੇ ਆ ਜੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ those who want to fight for a state go ahead and fight for it this is about globally Sikhs exist and we need to have an agreement on our process. Call it one Sikh parliament, call it whatever the people in our team are recommending. We stick to our terms, indigenous terms. And our term is Sabbath Khalsa. Sabbath Khalsa is not about kalle Punjab de honge, ya kalle Akaliyan de honge, ya kalle ek political hardcore party de honge. Sabbath Khalsa means all Sikhs. So what does that mean? It means we came up with 10 guiding principles. This really is a time to dream and refigure how do we make ourselves governable as 30 million strong in the world. 30 million is the population of Malaysia today. This is how many Sikhs exist in the world. It's a serious work. We need to spend few months, few years to figure out how to get this done. So Guru inspired, proactively inclusive, we actually define that to say we need to make sure there's a diversity of 3 kinds, of ideology, of gender and geography. We have not done this work. ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਕਰਨਾ ਕਿਵੇਂ 53% of the population is women and at best they are used as tokens at best. You know what's the difference between token and pioneer? If there is somebody is pioneering something, there will be multiple after that person leaves. Token is there's nothing done after that. And mostly we see token that's why. ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ pioneers open the floodgates. We actually don't have pioneering efforts anymore. They stopped about 70, 80 years ago. So just think about that from a diversity angle. Those are some of the terms. Essentially our work is we need to come up with a relationship between in 2016, being in 180 countries, being in 25 major world population centers of nations we call them, how do we have a civil process to make our own decisions? Essentially that requires us to think about ਕਿ ਰਿਲੇਸ਼ਨਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਦੀ ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਪੰਜ ਪਿਆਰਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਦੀ ਜੋੜ ਬੇਲਿਆਂ ਦੀ that's the checks and balances we need to really think about doctrinally what is our answer that's the long term work short term work is everyone wants to know what will happen in next Sabbath Khalsa who's going to be the jathedar and what's the process so that's what we are focused on we started with town hall meetings sangat de level te then we've gone to conferences global level we are also starting to now go into developing consensus building using Lumio, which you'll hear about later, which essentially is how do stateless people develop consensus. That's what we are after because it's a stateless model. Okay. The last time we were able to put together in last 4 months, in March there was a World Sikh conference in Australia. I want to spend a minute just talking about it. This is the first time I'm aware of where people of different schools of thought came together. People who believed in Khalistan, people who didn't believe in Khalistan. People who are SGPC, people who are anti-SGPC. Like including SGPC General Secretary was there, and including Rajendra Singh Banas, who doesn't wear turban but fights all the human rights cases was there. This kind of work hasn't happened yet. About 40 of them people like that. People who are part of AAP and people who are not part of AAP. My point is, it's very easy to say this is what we agreed if all of you think alike. So this was a experimentation we did for 3 days. Some names are there, you can see it. And what we were really after was, can we have a minimum understanding of the jathedar key qualifications on and Sabbath Khalsa the key process of it. We'll get into this detail. Now where we are is, we were waiting for April, didn't happen. I was there, we were trying to get a few things done. But there's incredible manipulation. If you're interested, we can talk about that. Essentially, we need to be prepared. And our next work is, now we have a draft document, second draft, which has gone through these things. When I see more Santang ko ja rahe hain, I'm personally and the team members are going and now talking to influencers globally, primarily in UK and Punjab right now, both in establishment and anti-establishment, because that's what consensus building is. You cannot say you are not included, then you are violating the principle. They can themselves decide, we choose not to participate. So this is where the important principles, inclusion principles are very important. So our next step is, we are essentially developing the next draft in English and Punjabi. It's almost done, hopefully it will be published this week. And then we're starting to do work with pracharaks in Punjab, political parties, people who are in establishment, as I call, anti-establishment, right-wingers, left-wingers, centrists, whatever you want to call it, both online population and offline. On the last slide, essentially, this is what the project is about. I mean, I can't simplify, this is how I'm simplified it. Essentially, we need few people who are not aligned with any Jathebandi and any political party, who need to become, quote-unquote, the civil servants of Akal. I use that term intentionally, just to explain. Because civil servants don't change. Leadership for the first 2-3 years changes. And we are missing them. That's why our work is not happening. We need people, so people used to ask me, how many men, women do you think we need? I used to say we need about 1% of Sikh population to do this. So 1% of Sikh population is 300,000 Sikhs. That's a lot of Sikhs. So my new number, which I've been using for last month, is 0.001%. So those of you who talk about practical things, this is very practical. That becomes 3,006. Can you imagine 3,006 who are only answerable to, in terms of Akal Takht Sahib, to Har Gobind Sahib, and not aligned with anyone, and become the watchdogs? They are the ones who get this done. Otherwise, we are all aligned. We all have agendas, some hidden, some implicit, some explicit. But this is the work. You have to dream again. You have to dream on how to make this Takht, make it work such that it works globally for us, such that it becomes the watchdog, such that it only deliberates based on Gurmat principles, which includes inclusion at the highest levels. So that's the work. We need to become dreamers again. And I'll end it here. You know, English ਦੀ ਕਹਾਵਤ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬੜੀ ਵਾਰ use ਕਰਦੇ ਆ, ਜੋ use ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦਾ community ਜਿਹੜੀ ਨਾ, the community which is where the memories are bigger than the dream is already done. And that's where we are. Our memory is bigger. We are always invoking the past. And we used to be the dreamers. ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੀਜ਼ state ਜਾਂ community ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਸੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ, ਸਿੱਖੋ ਕਰਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ. So we were the trendsetters. Now we become trend followers. People used to quote us, yeah, ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਰਤਾ. Now we quote the word. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying we have taken that back seat. We need to go on the front seat. And the way to go to the front seat is shovel lovers. We need to know how the world operates, understand the best models out there. But at the end of the day, we are most interested in Guru Nanak's model. And Guru Nanak's model is saying we need a serious, we are being legally manipulated, guys. 99.9% of the work is to counter that. And this is very simple. You talk to any reasonable person and tell them this is like Italian government deciding who should the next pope be. The ingenious of the design they're using currently is they actually select our leaders. You and I don't. Then the world calls them our leaders. You and I don't. And they make the decisions, but we are supposed to follow it. That's where Washington DC's phrase comes in. We don't believe in taxation without representation. That's what's happening with the state. Legal manipulation idea, then we need to go back to shovel. People who listen to shovel, that's where we started today. ਉਹਨਾਂ mind clear ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ. And it's all about that. ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ mind clear ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਦੇਖਣਗੇ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਕਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ dress ਹੋ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ ਤੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਪੱਗ ਦਾ style ਕੀ ਹੈ. We never used to do this. This is all in the last 30 years. I've seen the day when I used to go to my Nanakes in Mullapur, how a Taksali Sikh used to meet an AKJ Sikh. It wasn't animosity. There was difference of opinions, but it was a healthy one. Today there's animosity, where people are actually doing press conferences and putting on hit lists. That cannot be the rule. It never was. We fought with the ones who produced the hit lists. We took them to task. So this is what Guru's warriors and Guru's lovers were. They're born out of Shabad. Our work is to re-envision Akal Takht Sahib and become answerable only to the Guru. And those individuals, 3,000 of them, globally, if we can put them together, I think we'll be able to re-envision what Akal Takht needs to be. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I know many of you are probably overflowing with questions and thoughts that you'd like to share. I'm going to ask you to hold them in your mind, don't forget them, or write them on a little piece of paper, because we are going to do a slight demonstration for you here now on some of the online platform development that is happening to discuss how we connect 6 globally who, like Guruji said, are stateless. And to do that, Bajaprit Singh, one of our local Sevadars, is been involved, and he has some understanding of what programs they are bringing into place, and he will actually demonstrate some of it for you here today. So please, Bajaprit Singh.
Can you hear me okay? So again, thank you, Harinder Singh, for giving that presentation, which provided a lot of context and of the history as well as what's going on today. But Benji mentioned, I think, very clearly that we all felt this sort of pain of separation, I think, from our leaders when the last Sarbat Khalsa happened, right? I know I feel we had a town hall here, and it didn't really combine our opinions. There was no way for us to share that, right? And Free Akal Takht team has done a lot of work in trying to collect opinions on social media across Facebook, Twitter, etc., as well as doing town halls and collecting these opinions. But we need a format that is much more, if we can take advantage of technology to really consolidate opinions globally and present that to the leaders of Sarbat Khalsa, I mean, that would be incredible, right? So that's the initiative that Free Akal Takht is trying to involve next, to work on next, and that platform that we use is called Townhall. So rather than talking much about it, I'm just going to show you the page. So this can be accessed from freeakaltakht.org/discuss. Lumio is basically, it's got 2 parts to it. So there's a forum. There are all these threads that you can start. There's only a few. Right now it's very bare bones. We want the Sangha to be involved. We want the Sangha to be deciding what's even being discussed, because that's the whole point of having consensus-based and Sangha-based decision-making. For the purposes of this workshop, I will go over some specific questions, but just to show you the format, so if there's a thread on Sarbat Khalsa, and the question is, what is the purpose of Sarbat Khalsa? What should be the procedures for calling it? So first thing you would do is create a login here, and I'll just give it a quick, I'll make my brother an account. Sorry. Yeah. Well, there is. Okay, so it was a lot easier in the morning. I will just log in with my own account. But there's not even a confirmation. Please sign up. It's very easy to do. It won't take you anywhere. So I can post here saying, I believe the Sarbat Khalsa should happen twice a year. I'll post that. And then someone will probably saying, yeah, that's it. Again, very basic. The special part of Lumio is actually the proposal. So let's say this is a consensus. We've seen that everyone on the forum so far is agreeing that it should happen twice a year. It just happened. So someone can start a proposal and say, hey, does that pass? Can we put this to a vote? And what are everyone's actual opinions on just this topic? Because the thread might include so many other things, but we want to slowly build consensus on small aspects so we can develop policies and procedures broadly. So again, says, for example, 3-day vote. So there are 4 options that you have here. One option is to agree. The other is to abstain. Again, you can choose not to vote. To disagree or to block. We, in our guidelines, are requesting that if we disagree with anything or if we want to block something. Sorry, to clarify, the difference between that is, to disagree says that I think this could maybe be done better or something, but I'm not going to stop it from going through. Block means that I specifically think there's a big major issue with this and it should not pass, and I'm not at all okay with this going through. But both of them, we require a written explanation of why, because again, we need to have these discussions to help consensus. So I would say agree to this. This would basically create a chart overall of all the members that have put in their opinions, and I mean it's pretty basic. I think everyone's understanding it. So I won't spend too much time on it. But that's the basic function of a loop.
If you're doing consensus, it doesn't go forward until everybody agrees.
So we can talk about that. That's also part of the criteria of what counts as consensus and what is gonna go into the draft. But that's also a conversation that we have to have. Again, it's kind of bare bones at the moment, and this is something that we're going to be developing, but I'd like to move on to a specific workshop that we can use for this Sunday. So, I recently mentioned that there was a conference that happened in Melbourne in March. Again, there was a wide diversity of people that showed up there at that conference, and they put together a draft of mainly discussing 2 topics, one about Jathedars and one about Sarbat Khalsa. That draft is also linked here, you can see that. But, so, these were leaders that came together and they had their own consensus, but for us to have a global monthly consensus, we need to have our opinion shared on that as well, right? So this would be a forum where we could actually do that. So if people have we can post this on here, but now our Detroit Sangha locally can go online, comment and say this is what I think about this proposal in the draft. This is something that ideally we could have done this in person if we all had laptops and everything. But what I'd like to do for now is actually do this offline. And what we'll do is then we can post this information online afterwards so that we can share that again with the leaders of this conference and the pre-conference teams. So, I'm going to need Libya's help with this, and we already have some volunteers. So I'm going to go through one by one all the proposals that were in that draft, and we'd like to see, and again, if we had time, we would do a proper discussion where we could state why we're disagreeing, why we want to block it. But for the time being, if everyone can just raise their hand for if I agree, if I'd like to abstain, or if I disagree. And then we'll actually break after that for a Q&A session while I put together the data, and then we can go over that. So, the first proposal is Jathedars must follow Sikh Rat and Riyada, must be Amritari, Nityanemi, Rahatwan, aspire to the Miri Piri spirit, and accept nothing but Sri Guru Granth Sahib as their guru. So, if you agree to this proposal, please raise your hand.
Please raise them very high so it's easier for us to count. Thank you.
This proposal is a question from jumping to.
Can you repeat the questions in the W now?
Say it again.
ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੇਸਿਕਲੀ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਹੋਣ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਰਹਿਤ ਮਰਿਆਦਾ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹੋਣ, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤਧਾਰੀ ਹੋਣ, ਨਿਤਨੇਮੀ ਹੋਣ, ਰਹਿਤਵਾਨ ਹੋਣ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੀਰੀ ਪੀਰੀ ਦਾ ਸੰਕਲਪ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਮਰਪਿਤ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਹੋਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹੋਣ. Just so you know, these are actual proposals. After fighting for 3 days, this was the minimum consensus developed by that very diverse group. Okay? So we're just trying to see what does this Sangha think of this proposal. ठीक है जी, is clear?
No, please, but with Jathedar.
Just any Jathedar. So this is the idea right now. So can I just suggest something for activity? A activity ਦਾ ਇੱਕ sample ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ. ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਾਂ discussion ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ, ਆਪਾਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ. This is just to see what you guys think of this. Okay? So any ਜਥੇਦਾਰ, whatever ਜਥੇਦਾਰ means, ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਹੋਈ ਨਾ ਮੇਰੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜੈਂਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਹੋਗੀ ਲੌਂਗ ਟਰਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੇ, ਸ਼ਾਰਟ ਟਰਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ ਦੋ ਕੰਮ ਹੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੇ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਮੋਸਟਲੀ ਲੋਕੀ ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਸੈਸ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ, ਅਸੀਂ ਫਿਰ ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਅਡਾਪਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਫॉर ਅੱਜ ਦੀ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀ. So if you guys all follow what Ajitpreet is saying for next 15 minutes, then we will have discussion. Thank you.
Real quick though, is there another question or proposal similar
No.
to this in concept? Okay, so
No.
they're all distinct.
They're all distinct
So there's
proposals.
no trick here. Like
No, there's no trick. The idea is, remember the idea is to simplify it, make it easily accessible to anyone and everyone. So there is no trick. Every single statement is mutually exclusive, which means there are no two options of the same kind.
So, everybody, if we can just have show of hands for proposal number 1, yes.
This,
If you disagree.
Don't,
If you would just,
abstain,
Abstain.
abstain. Just stick to the terms there. Yeah.
that's okay.
You can choose to abstain. There are reasons for that. There are political reasons for that, which should be allowed. This is, by the way, इस सारी चीज़ which है ना, there are reasons, there are governance principles. कई बार कानून अपने जत्थेबंदी को जाना होता है to say your face, you didn't vote, that's why. Not voting sometimes helps you instead of embarrassing that person. You have to understand how governance works. This is why they exist, and we have to all learn, those who are interested in Sikh governance. Anji.
So next proposal, Jathedars must be experienced and educated in Sikh studies and affairs with considerable knowledge on Sikh history, philosophy, Gurbani, world politics, and world religions.
if you agree, please raise.
So ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਗਿਆਨ ਹੋਵੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਸਟੱਡੀਜ਼ ਦਾ ਤੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ ਦਾ, ਫਲਸਫੇ ਦਾ, ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦਾ, ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਪੋਲਿਟਿਕਸ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਧਰਮਾਂ ਦਾ. How many agree? So this is for agreement.
Count again. 4 people.
Just keep it up. Keep the hands up. ਉਹੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਜੀ ਉਹ.
ਹਾਂਜੀ.
ਉਹੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ, don't worry.
I'm good.
Okay, good. How many disagree?
If you disagree,
It is okay, so you have 2 disagree. Any abstains? You're gonna keep moving. Anyone who abstains? 1 abstain. Okay. Third.
age, gender, race, ethnicity, and caste are not relevant criteria in Jathedar selection.
So ਉਮਰ ਕੀ ਆ, ਲਿੰਗ ਕੀ ਆ, ਐਥਨਿਸਿਟੀ, ਰੇਸ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਕੈਸਟ ਹੀ ਕਹਿ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਿੰਦੁਸਤਾਨੀ ਪਰੰਪਰਾ ਵਿੱਚ, ਤੇ ਇਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਟੇਰੀਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ. How many
If you
agree?
agree, please raise
Once we ask the question, can we just like wait a second for the thing? Because
Sure.
once they raise their hand halfway through,
Okay.
just
All right. Just keep counting, guys. Okay. All 3 done. How many disagree? Disagree not कर
If
रहे
you
हैं.
disagree, please raise your hand.
Counting. But Janine.
So there is no of course.
But Janine.
Yeah.
Don't
if
assume
you don't
anything.
agree fully with
If you
this,
don't agree, just put your hand up. Those who disagree. This is how it works, guys. This is polling.
That's fine.
Those who disagree.
and please share your honest opinions, there's no
Yeah.
judgment.
All right. Disagree.
Please
Again.
disagree with the small portion.
This is disagree hands. Yeah. Abstain. 1 abstain. Okay. Next question, and we'll wait. So don't raise your hand until we ask you. Go ahead.
Jathedars must demonstrate sufficient leadership qualities, excellent communication skills, and ability to work collectively and collaboratively, and be active in public affairs and community liaison.
So ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ ਡੈਮੋਨਸਟ੍ਰੇਟ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਹੋਵੇ, ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਦਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੋਲਣ ਦੀ ਤੇ ਰਿਟਨ ਹੋਣ ਤੇ ਹੋਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਡੈਮੋਨਸਟ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ, ਤੇ ਪਬਲਿਕਲੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਸੰਗਤ ਦੇ ਲੈਵਲ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਵੇ, which means ਕਿ ਹੋਰ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋਣ, ਸਿਰਫ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀ ਨਾਲ ਨਹੀਂ. We take 10 seconds. Okay. How many of you agree?
should also be bold and fearless.
हाँ जी, ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਆਪਣੀ proposal ਬਾਅਦ ਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ. Second, how many disagree? Disagree. Those who disagree. Parliamentary process ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਬੜਾ ਕੁਝ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੇ ਜੇ ਆਪਣਾ ਆਪਣਾ ਕਰਕੇ ਫਿਰ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਊਗੀ.
Not fearless or
हाँ जी, how many disagree जी? That's the question. Okay. And third is, any abstains? Okay. 3 people abstain, 4 people abstain. Okay. Can you wait for the question? Thank you. Anji, next.
Jathedars must be action-oriented and politically aware of internal and external politics.
ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਲੈਣਾ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਬੜਾ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਗੈਰ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਭਲੀ ਭਾਂਤ ਹੋਣ. Okay, how many agree? Disagree? And abstain? Okay, next.
Jathedars must not hold prejudice of any kind towards any gender, race, ethnicity, caste, etc.
And this is repeating because earlier siga ki ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ criteria ਸੀ, this is about towards others. There are two different things. So ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਹੋਰ ਦੇ ਲਿੰਗ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ, ਰੇਸ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ, ਕੈਸਟ ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰਤੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਵਿਤਕਰਾ ਨਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋਣ.
All that agree?
Okay, guys, just wait. We haven't gone. So those who agree, now let's go. Okay, disagree? Any disagreements? Any abstainments? One abstain. Next.
Jathedars must demonstrate a life of service for the fund.
So ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੇ already ਪ੍ਰਤੀਕ ਹੋਵੇ, evident ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ already ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ. ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਕਰਨਗੇ. ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ demonstrate ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ level. How many agree? Disagree? And abstain? Okay, so that was the first part, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ related ਸੀ. ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ break ਲੈ ਲਓ ਫਿਰ ਅਗਲਾ set ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. Basically, you know, can you just imagine ਕਿ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਲੋਕ totally disagree ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ and who are actually active, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿੰਨੀ wordsmithing ਕੀਤੀ ਹੋਣੀ ਹੈ, because we all want to do wordsmithing, right? And that's okay, but just realize ਕਿ ਸਾਡੀ community ਵਿੱਚ ਨਾ ਅਜੇ training ਹੀ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਕੰਮ ਵੀ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰਨਾ. ਪਹਿਲੇ 2 ਦਿਨ ਤਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਲੜਦੇ ਰਹੇ, you guys want to see ਉਹ video ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਪਾਏ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ. ਦੇਖ ਲਿਓ how they talk to each other. They don't have that. And then at some point you have to say, okay, you know what? This is not about what you want. This is really about this is by governing for everyone, not just your own time. So wordsmithing बड़ी होती है, उसमें भी बड़ी हुई सी, इतने नहीं करते रहे सी, बड़े discussion होते रहे, कई यही कह जानेंगे तो ये क्यों कर रहे हो, ये क्यों नहीं करते, which is what we all want. But realize कि जो constituency होती है, they don't get to change the bills also, right? If you want to be active, then you have to become active and become part of the wordsmithing. You know, you can't have every way you want. So this is part of the training for the leadership, for the constituency, you know, संगत करने आपका कि हर एक का role हैगा, but recognize what that role is and recognize what the responsibility is. Second, and none of this is decision by the way, this is just polling. And one of the things is we are doing this on purpose. सिखाने में एक बड़ी जबरदस्त problem है. We cannot demonstrate internally or externally because we don't document what the agreement or disagreement is. So ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕੀ ਆ, everyone just picks up this mic and just speak and they go home. There's nothing documented. It's so important to document कि numbers, community चाहती की है. So the decision makers at least have that polling data. Right? And that's what we're trying to do. Okay. Next is now proposals regarding Sarbat Khalsa process. Andy.
It's lengthy, but quorum would require a representation of 51% of Sikhs of the Sikh community with consideration made of population, geography, schools of thought, thought leaders, and disenfranchised segments. Selection would be preferred over election with the following guidelines. 90 to 93% correlated to population size, 5 to 7% experts or luminaries, and 1 to 2% extraordinary funding.
Let me explain this because this is the toughest one. There are certain governance principles which basically one of them is Punjabi में फिर explain करना है ना पहला लिखा है हैगा कि कोई भी जब कोई मीटिंग होती है ना उसमें minimum number of representatives होते हैं. So 51% quorum का मतलब ये हैगा कि whatever the Sarbat Khalsa becomes, पावे वो 500 member ना पावे 100 ना पावे 20 member ना कोई representation की decision लेनी है ना. So Sarbat Khalsa is not everyone who's present. It's people who are deliberating. And ਉਹਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਆਪਣਾ ਮੈਕੈਨਿਜ਼ਮ ਹੈਗਾ, but we'll get to it. ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ 51% ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵੀ representatives ਨੇ ਉਹ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹੋਣ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ population, geography, population ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ. You cannot, if 80% population lives in Punjab, you can't have 80% representatives from diaspora. That's what this is saying. That is unfair governing principle. So the way it happens is, so it needs to be given population, geography, India ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵੀ inclusion, schools of thought, ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀਆਂ ਜਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਣਾਲੀਆਂ ਆਖ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ, thought leaders ਜਿਹੜੇ already ਮੰਨੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ who might not belong to any party or ਜਥੇਬੰਦੀ. For example, classically ਸਰਦਾਰ ਕਪੂਰ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੂੰ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਰੱਖੋਗੇ? So there are people who understand things and they have demonstrated they understand. You need some of those kind. And disenfranchised segments which basically ਜਨਾਨੀਆਂ ਦੀ participant, Dalit population ਦੀ, ਮੂਲ ਨਿਵਾਸੀਆਂ ਦੀ, youth, etc. Essentially ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਥਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਨਾਲ, but ਕੋਈ ਥਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ assertive ਇੱਥੇ affirmative action ਕਿਹਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, something like that idea, making sure it is a mandate to include them. Okay, so ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ basically ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ governance principles ਇਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ, there are basically 2-3 ways ਦੁਨੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ. ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ direct correlation with the population, ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜਨਸੰਖਿਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ representation ਹੋਣ. ਦੂਸਰਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੱਕ House of Representatives ਆ, that's based on population. But there's a Senate which is not based on population. Now we are trying to understand what are the other ways to do it. So essentially ਸਾਡੀ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜੇ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਹੈਗਾ, this is like Jewish World Congress, or if you want to look at ਜਿਵੇਂ Ismailis ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, they call them their Sharia councils. The idea here is, so this is the agreement which came. This was a heavily debated issue, but because most of us don't understand these things, right? Because there's a lot of work done worldwide on this work. Essentially, that agreement came that 90 to 93% must be based on population, because otherwise you cannot demonstrate to the world that you are being serious about this. And then 5 to 7% needs to be experts, which means those who actually study these things or those who understand what is happening. Luminaries ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਕੋਈ ਸੇਵਾ ਦੇ ਪੱਖੋਂ ਐਕਸਪਰਟ ਆ, ਕੋਈ ਪਾਲਿਸੀ ਦੇ ਪੱਖੋਂ. For example, Khalsa Aid should have a membership to it. If they have become the best in the world, we need to give them a space because they don't belong to school of thought. That's the idea. Or for example, human rights angle, so if you really want policy making, maybe Ravinder Singh should have the space because he's the only lawyer in the world who actually has, I don't know how many of you know, he was one of the 3 lawyers who did the prosecution of Pinochet. So that kind of work. People who are on top of their world, they have demonstrated it, they understand their world, that kind of a thing. So this cannot be hundreds of people, but this is like respectfully you invite them to make sure they have the watchdog and they have the know-how kind of a thing. And third is extraordinary funding contributors. These are individuals, not organizations, which essentially will mean, in today's age, this becomes a very debatable issue. But so I'm not going to give any names right now because we did know 2 names and there was, almost chairs that were about to fly. But the point is, because there's a process agreement right now. But historically, these would include people like maybe Professor Poonam Singh, Paivir Singh, Payantir Singh, Pindramwale, that kind of individuals. Where there is largely an agreement on that they are the major contributors, Okay. So proposal, how many agree?
quorum for what is this?
Quorum of whatever the representatives are. So the next one might be a tough one to even get 50 or 100. So whatever the representatives are, at least 51% of them should be participating. In our proposals, we are saying in long term this needs to be somewhere around 500 people globally. But in the next one, you might not even be able to pull that off. So whatever the number of dignitaries or representatives are.
These aren't like necessarily Jathedar.
No, this is nothing to do with Jathedar. They are the ones who should be involved in the process to figure out who the Jathedar needs to be. So basically, just so you know, the reality is this, guys, today. I said this to Kiran Jyot Kaur, who is a sitting member of SGPC, a day before Sarbat Khalsa. She said, I agree with what you guys are doing, but I disagree with the way you are doing it. I said, okay, tell me how to do it. And she was quiet, because I understand, so she's part of the ruling party. And I'm going to put it in black and white, because certain things are black and white. I said, Panji, farak ye hai, aaj means that was November 9th. कि आज सारे डिसीजन एक माड़ा बंदा ले रहे हैं कल सारे डिसीजन 3 माड़े बंदे लेंगे बट आवर होप इज कि ये 5-10 साल या 5-10 अटेम्प्ट्स कर लिए कि ये 100 to 500 चंगे बंदे ते जनानियां किवें होण दैट्स व्हाट वी आर आफ्टर sometimes it happens it all comes down to public engagement if 500,000 to a million people and other people want it and they're out on the streets it can happen in one attempt but you don't know what's going to happen so whatever the representation size is, back to the process of polling, proposal, how many agree? Okay. Disagree? Abstain? Next.
Every representative to the Sarbat Khalsa would commit to being a follower of the Sikh Rahm Maryada and profess a belief in the institution of the free Takht in that it should be self-governed by Sikhs for Sikhs without interference from the state or political parties, including Sikh political parties.
So, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਖਾਲਸੇ ਦੇ representative ਹੋ ਮਤਲਬ ਜਿਹੜੇ delegates ਬਣਨਗੇ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਰਹਿਤ ਮਰਿਆਦਾ ਮੰਨਦੇ ਹੋਣ ਫਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿਸ਼ਵਾਸ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹੋਣ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੀ ਖੁਦ ਮੁਖਤਿਆਰੀ ਦੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਸਟੇਟ ਤੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟਰਫੀਰੈਂਸ ਨਾ ਹੋਵੇ How many agree? Disagree? Abstain? Next.
Items to be deliberated at Sarbat Khalsa would not include doctrinal issues, but rather focus on matters of urgency, economic, political issues, leadership violations, and bayadbi of civil defense.
So, Sarbat Khalsa ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਹੜਾ ਏਜੰਡਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਸਿੰਪਲ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰਮਤ ਦੇ ਵਿਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਡਾਕਟਰਿਨ ਦੇ ਵਿਸ਼ਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਤਭੇਦ ਆ ਉਹ ਨਾ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਸਿਰਫ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਰਜੈਂਟ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਕਨੋਮਿਕ ਤੇ ਪੋਲੀਟੀਕਲ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਲੀਡਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਦਾ ਕ੍ਰਾਈਸਿਸ ਆ ਤੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਦੀ ਬੇਅਦਬੀ ਦੇ ਇਸ਼ੂ ਨੇ ਸਿਰਫ ਇਹੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ So what should show up on the agenda of Sarbat Khalsa? How many agree? Disagree? Abstain? Next.
Decision-making would be consensus-based. That does not mean there's 100% agreement. Individuals that disagree would record their dissent, but then agree to implement the decisions without undermining the process.
ਸਾਰੇ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਸਰਬਸੰਮਤੀ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਣਗੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਪੂਰੇ ਸਹਿਮਤ ਨੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਆਬਜੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਦੱਸਤੀ ਆ ਬਟ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਡਿਸੀਜਨ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਊਗਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਫੋਲੋ ਕਰਨਗੇ How many agree? Disagree? Abstain? Next.
The Sarbat Khalsa should be an open and transparent process. All 30 million Sikhs should have access to the proceedings online.
ਸਰਬਤ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਟੋਟਲੀ ਖੁੱਲਾ ਹੋਵੇ, ਖੁੱਲੇ ਸੱਦੇ ਦਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਓਪਨ ਹੋਵੇ, ਟ੍ਰਾਂਸਪੇਰੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੋਵੇ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕੀ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਕੌਣ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਵੋਟ ਪਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸਾਰੇ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਮਿਲੇ 30 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਨੂੰ। 30 ਮਿਲੀਅਨ could be a debatable number, ਪਰਪਸ ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕਿ ਪੂਰੇ ਗਲੋਬਲ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਉਹਦੀ ਆਨਲਾਈਨ ਐਕਸੈਸ ਹੋਵੇ। How many agree? Disagree? Abstain? Next.
To ensure the execution of each decision made, an implementation team must be declared with a deadline and an action plan.
ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਉੱਥੇ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਉਹ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਨਾਲ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕੌਣ ਕਰੂ ਫੈਸਲੇ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹ ਕਿਹੜੀ ਟੀਮ ਆ ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਦ ਤੱਕ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ, ਉਹਦੀ ਡੈਡਲਾਈਨ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਪਲਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਵੇ। ਸੋ ਸਿਰਫ ਫੈਸਲਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਾਇਆ ਜਾਓ, ਫੈਸਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਣ ਇੰਪਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਕਰੂ, ਕਦ ਤੱਕ ਕਰੂ ਤੇ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਰੂ। How many agree? Disagree? Abstain? Next? That's it. Okay. So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say thank you. So, this is the first step in collecting global opinion and to start a conversation on Lumio. What I'll do now is get the data and collect that data, but I'll hand it off to Sanjay to discuss any questions you may have.
So for one comment and then it's an open forum and Sangeeta will take over. The comment is this, guys. You see, can you imagine जितने leadership की ये भी training ना होवे कि फैसले लेने के लिए? This is a long process. इस process ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ we are not even at the tip of the iceberg. But because urgent matters are in front of us, every time I call the phase B is the preparation phase. So many opportunities come, people say कि राजवाड़ा वेले हो गया सी, डॉक्टर सूरज सिंह वाले दा हो गया सी, 47 चेदा हो गया सी, 84 चेदा हो गया सी. Problem is we have never prepared in a civil dialogue on how to make our decisions. And this is why what you will see is, this is what they had agreed to, so we just stuck to whatever the agreement was. But obviously there is much more room for development, right? What impression we wanted to leave you with was, this is, governance is a serious business. Politicking cannot be the only thing to do. You know, at some point the campaign stops, you have to govern. Sikhs ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਤਾ ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, it's constant politicking. These are the steps which we need, that politicking ਕਰਦੇ ਰਹੋ, but at some point you have to learn to govern. And these are some preliminary ideas, not even steps yet, on what it requires to start creating a mindset for governance. Thank you.
Very simple question.
A second. Question answer because there's a format. Just to be fair, because we stopped others.
They agree to these proposals.
We'll put the names and we'll put them again. Give us a second. But let me answer this one if you don't mind. They were people, the slide is off. There was a representatives called from India, Punjab, US, Canada, and UK, and Australia, New Zealand. Essentially, you see, there is no, when people say कि सानू तो बुलाया नहीं कि बड़ी प्रॉब्लम आती है, तो मैंने भी किसी ने नहीं बुलाया, believe me, मैं जाके आप ही पंगे ले रहा हूँ, है ना? So किसी ने नहीं बुलाना. The thing is, everything is hijacked right now. Everything is manipulated right now. That is the reality. ਜਿਹਦਾ ਜੋਰ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਸਾਰੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ हैं कि ਅਸੀਂ ਬੰਦ नहीं कर रहे, but ਉਹ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ हैं कि ਸਾਡੀ ਪਾਰਟੀ ਦਾ ਬੋਲਬਾਲਾ ਹੋਵੇ. That's what's going on. So what needs to happen is, we worked with, our team worked with the people who called that conference. We asked them, can we have part of the day of the conference to talk about this? which they agreed to, so we did it. ਉੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਬੁਲਾਏ ਸੀਗੇ, I got that list. It was about 53 people. Then I gave them 50 more names. कि ਤੁਸੀਂ token ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਬੁਲਾਈ ਹੈ. Here are organizations in the world. We have demonstrated which are the women we need to include, which youth leaders. There are some budget issues, other issues. Not everything went the way it needed to. But even then, the people who were present in terms of who are somewhat known, somewhat controversial as well, because those who were, they are controversial too. I mean, it's simple, because there are oppositions to them as well. And there are some healthy oppositions too. But they included people like Punjab, for example, included current SGPC's General Secretary, Sardar Paul. It included Gurtej Singh IAS, it included Darshan Singh Dhillon, it included Rajendra Singh Bains, it included Sarabjit Singh Verka, it included, who am I missing? Jarnail Singh MLA. I'm probably missing some other people. Then from US and Canada, it included some organizational representatives, which included people, US and Canada, Maninder Singh, he is very active in the Khalistan forums. It also included Voice of Khalsa radio people. It included a couple of radio guys from within Australia. I think they call it Qawm Di Awaaz. Those are very active political Khalistan activists. There were anti-Khalistan activists there as well, primarily people from India and other places as well. It included a few members from UK, I'm forgetting their names, and US and Canada. My point is, they were not from one Jathebandi. They were not all Amritdharis. They were not all turban-wearing even. And this is what is needed to understand this, right? So you can have a criteria for a Jathedar that he or she needs to follow some principles. Just like you will require, the US has a requirement, you can disagree with it, but their requirement is you have to be born in this country, or you have to be 35 years old, right? So there has to be some criteria. And what we were trying to do was, can we agree to the minimum criteria? Like some of them wanted to say it can only be a Khardu for a Jathedar. And others said, why? So those kind of discussions took place, which were healthy discussions. So basically it had about 40 people who are relatively active, we can say, in some subgroups within the Sikh community.
So I think moving on to the question answer, or further in the question answer session, I have about 20 minutes that we can use for question and answers, and I know it's very asking everyone to think out of their comfort zone to come and line up to actually use the microphones, but we are requesting that you do this. If you have questions or comments, because I know it's hard to move out of place, and sometimes we just want to ask a question from our seats, but I think if we're going to be active participants, just even getting up and stretching and coming to the microphone is a good practice in owning your question and owning your comment. So I'm going to ask everyone to limit their questions or comments to 30 seconds, and I'm going to ask Ryuji and anyone else who's responding to limit their answers to about 2 minutes. Please do not mind or take it disrespectfully if I stop you in the middle of your question if it's taking too long, or in the response. We're really just trying to manage the time of the meeting and want to get through as many questions as we can.
Okay, so my question isn't really more about the background of the content. I'm pretty much in line with what you presented with that. And maybe this is more for much bigger, I don't know. But with Lumio, how are you going to control bad players or people trolling or people participating in Lumio because there's no vetting process from what I saw how he registered. So how do you stop a bad player or a troll or just random people just participating and maybe skewing things because they don't have the same?
So I'll start my answer as far as I know. Actually, the president of Lumio, believe it or not, is interested in this project. He contacted us. They're like, it's puzzling for people. Just take yourself out of a box and think from somebody who doesn't understand the Sikh scenario. They're like, 30 million of you globally, and you don't have a system? How come? So he's interested in how we're going to use this software. Anyway, the point is, Lumio itself has some integrity systems built into it. So they look into, those IP addresses to other things where, that's, what do you call it, soft copying? I don't know, all these terms that people use in hiding their identities and reusing their identities. So there's the integrity of the software itself. And secondly, there's supposed to be moderators on these things to see if it's being gamified. So there are things with Lumio, and then on top of it, we need to have moderators on their own forums. And you want to add anything? Is the mic?
Pretty much. That's what he's saying.
Like, you know, these moderators are kind of localized, and they're controlling their local.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, these are procedures that as you mentioned, this is a step-by-step process. So at the moment, we're really sharing being able to personally create those elements. I think we're not totally expecting it to be chaos. But there will be procedures that
And also, we're very much about decentralized system. So we just need to make sure that it's not being manipulated. And this is one of the reasons Lumion was fixed, because there were two options in the Okay.
Thank you. Mike, so I have a couple of questions. You talk about this as being a governance forum as opposed to something for doctrine. So my first question is governance of what? My only concern regarding when we six outside of Punjab start to talk about governing anything, six in Punjab have to suffer the consequences. So that's one, I think one thing we have to keep in mind. And if we're not addressing doctrine, we talk about Sri Guru Granth Sahib as being divine. My personal belief is Radha is human-made, it's not Guru-made. It's not the Guru Granth Sahib. So if we're not addressing doctrine, and then we're flipping, we're in the catch-22 of we're asking people to serve up Khalsa to be like Radha Marada, Armatar, all of those things, but we haven't I think, personally, I believe we haven't built a foundation for those issues. So those two questions in one, but I did it in 30 seconds.
So the simple answers are, we studied about 10 different governance models in the world. In those models, we're looking at how the world does these things. This is if you want to find parallels, this will be sort of like having a Jewish World Congress kind of an idea. Now, it's not exactly that, but something like that. So what is the governance for? Governance is for two purposes. Any internal decision making of the six, which affects six at large, and we have criteria for that. If you get into that, what does it mean, what percent population suffering or affecting or things of that nature. But it's internal governance, what should six do? Second part of the governance is things which are affecting, remember it's a parallel to Delhi and Lahore at the time. So things which are affecting the world, what is our stand on it? Currently, individuals claim to give the six stands. This needs to be a deliberative stand which should come out of Calcutta. So that's why be explicit in asking and I'll be very explicit in answering. So I said governance is for that. Governance of six in global phenomena. In a stateless society, we in our FAQs, we have explicitly answered why this is not about Punjab or Khalistan or Free Punjab, because that's the issue. We are trying to get six to agree on the process. If we have a process agreement, then we have a platform to discuss any issue. So this is to create a process agreement for internal decision making, as well as how to create six stands for things which are affecting the world, like climate change, for example. Currently, six do it, but one or two do it and then claim to be representative of all six, which is another problem.
You didn't answer the question
Radha, sure. So here is the deal. You have to again come to an agreement of some minimum standards for your own governance. The rule and regulations are always mandated. This is why Rehat Maryada is not a perfect document. It is a document for self-governance. There are disagreements on that as well. But that said, you have to agree to some minimum program. So it's like saying, if you want to have a Jathedar, what criteria do you give them? Should we say they should follow Akhandi Jatha, missionary college, you have to agree to something. Or doesn't it Maryada? Because this is a theo-political body, which means religious as well as political, you have to have some religious criteria. Now, if we have a process agreement, and the Ristic Rath everyone needs to be revised, and by the way, there were people who disagreed with it. We asked them, and I'll ask you, tell us a better alternative. And since there is no better alternative, you come up with the minimum program, which once there is a process agreement, we can have a systematic revisions of these things. For example, bills and amendments on them, procedural manuals on them. But every procedural manual does not go to all the way to higher authorities. So there's a levels of decision making. So there's a lot of chaos. Disagree. We haven't had anything like this in our past. And we live in a new millennium with new technologies and new challenges, and we are all trying to envision how to do this. Okay?
So
So my question is more to help make this relevant to those of us living here and our children who are living here, because we're really disconnected from the Akal Takht idea. I think our children are very disenfranchised. They don't understand that its relevance in our lives. And how do we make them interested in that and help them understand the relevance of this?
Excellent question. This is the one I'm most interested in. So here is the deal. Is Pope relevant? He was irrelevant, then he became relevant, then he was irrelevant, then he became relevant. Relevancy is developed by institutions themselves. Whether you like it or not, because of, they had the worst one, and for the first time in their history, they let him go without his death. What does that tell you? Even if the best individual comes forward today in the Sikh world, and I'm not saying any Pope, that was just an example, they cannot do anything because there's no system. The beauty of systems and procedures is, even if they are violated, if there's a strong system, it will autocorrect and bring forth the right person, eventually. So relevance to us, if you classify yourself as a Sikh in any capacity, including cultural Sikhs, this is about you. Now why do I say this? Well, this is how it is. The reason is this. If you want to get married the way you want to get married, if you want to get married, name your children the particular way, whether you like it or not, people right now make those decisions. I gave a very recent example. And whether you like it or not, even if you go to Gurdwara twice a year, when somebody's getting married or somebody's dead, sometimes it's the same thing, but that's anyway. The point is, you think this is not relevant, but this is so relevant, I can even tell you this is why legally it is getting manipulated over and over. So, even if you're interested in naming ceremony, this is about you.
I think if I can just add to, for like those of us that are out of Punjab and maybe we do our naming ceremonies or do whatever we want on the side, I think for even those of us, like what we tell the kids at camp too, are that if we like ascribe to the Sikh nation of sorts, whatever that virtual nation might be, if there's something going on in the world, women are being abducted from Nigeria, there's an earthquake in Haiti, there should be a Sikh response to it. There should be a collective Sikh response to humanity and things like that, and those are very relevant issues to our young people today. Like there's an American response to something, but there should be also a Sikh response, and we don't have a platform to even create a response in a consensus building way.
And this is our platform. At the end of the day, Akal Takht Sahib, just imagine it being with functional offices. That's where you solve Gurdwara problems. They stink right now, let's be honest. Because there is no system. The whole breakdown is a system failure. And it's not that we never had a system. They've actually manipulated it legally. And they keep manipulating it. And we keep saying, Darbar Sahib hunda, uthe ho gaya. So we just talk to each other. But what we really need to do is go win back our Gurdwaras, win back our Akal Takht. Because that is our debate forum. Okay?
ਕੁਛ ਦਾ ਜਵਾਬ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਮੇਰੇ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਸਵਾਲ ਦਾ। ਮੇਰੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੁਆਲੀਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਲਈ ਡਿਸਕਸ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਜੇ ਹੋਣੀਆਂ ਚਾਹੀਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਹੱਦ ਤੱਕ ਉਹ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਨੇਗੀਆਂ, ਪਰ ਕੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਰੋਕਣ ਲਈ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਚੁਣੇ ਜਾਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਕਰਪਟ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਲੀਡਰ ਦਾ ਚਮਚਾ ਨਿਕਲਿਆ।
ਬਹੁਤ ਵਧੀਆ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਸੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਪਹਿਲਾ ਸਟੇਟਮੈਂਟ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਆਈ ਵੁੱਡ ਸੇ ਕਿ ਦ ਡੇਟਾ ਇਜ਼ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਿਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ who knows how it happened? Tell me the last 30 years which ਕਿਹੜੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ properly? I'm being very upfront. Some of them we like, some we don't like. ਇੱਕ ਨੂੰ ਚੱਕ ਕੇ imagine this. Now this is the data in the last 30 years. The Jathedar of Akal Takht was picked up in broad daylight and assassinated. That inquiry goes to Punjab Human Rights Commission. In its 4th hearing, it's dismissed. His name was Konke, Jathedar Gurdev Singh Konke. Jeda koi chajda aanda ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ. It happened in the 90s. We had a Jathedar, we have all kinds of Jathedar. ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ criteria ਬਿਲਕੁਲ clear ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. In fact, even in this last Sabak Khalsa, we knew they were not going to discuss the names with us, but I got them to agree to 4 criteria which they completely violated. ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਯਾਰ ਇਦਾਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਹੁੰਦਾ criteria ਤੇ agreement ਕਰੋ ਨਾ. Then we can disagree on names, but you know, sometimes the necessary evil kind of thing happens. But the point is, we have to have agreement on criteria. If criteria is any, then even if you don't like someone, if the person meets the criteria, you have to live with it. Yeah. Right now, there is no criteria, and that's the problem. Second part is chamche to dekho, chamche is karke nikalde ne, kyunki koi system hai nahi. Every jathedar, I worked personally with 3 jathedars. Somebody who was most educated, somebody who read the Hindi badi pagdi si, and somebody who sabse zyada gyani hai. They were all failures because there was no system behind them. मैं तो Canada का example देना. I had a meeting with 18 of the 19 people who are 6 who are in the parliament now. Okay, so ਜਿਹੜੀ एक है ये पंजाबी और non Sikh है इस करके 18 out of 19, so all 18 Sikhs. You know, one of the things that was about some of the governance system, because we're trying to create, you know, at some point you need all the help in the world if the system goes through, because there's going to be a lot of opposition to this from the government. You know what they said to me? They said, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਬੰਦਾ ਬੈਠਾ ਸੀ, ਜਿਹੜਾ 40 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦਾ ਉੱਥੇ ਤਾੜੀ ਦੇ 30 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਹੋਈ ਗਿਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ, ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਯਾਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਨਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਧੱਕਾ ਲਾ ਕੇ ਭੇਜ ਤਾਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ, ਪਿੱਛੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿੰਦੇ. ਥਿੰਕ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਇਟ. ਇਹੀ ਜਥੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ. ਉਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਕਈ ਵਾਰੀ ਬੰਦੂਕ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਵੀ ਜਥੇਦਾਰ ਬਣਾ ਲਏ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਬਟ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸਪੋਰਟ ਲਈ ਕੋਈ ਨਹੀਂ ਖੜਦਾ. ਸੋ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਅੰਡਰਸਟੈਂਡ ਚੱਲ ਕੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ. ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਫॉर letting me know.
I think we have time for these last 2 questions.
I think it's an interesting discussion. My question would be, how, you have that majority, 90% based on where the population is, and we can see how Punjab is electing people who are incompetent. How can we be sure whether you have the majority coming from India, again hijacking the Supreme Council that you've already created?
So, ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ, thanks for asking that, but ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇਹ ਹੈਗੀ ਜੀ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪੰਜਾਬ ਵਾਲਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਕੋਈ ਬੜੇ ਲਾਇਕ ਬੰਦੇ ਸਿਲੈਕਟ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. So this is a human behavior problem. Please stop having them. ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਲੜ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਦੇ. ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਸੇਮ ਬੰਦੇ representative ਬਣੇ ਹੋਏ ਨੇ same organizations ਦੇ ਨਾਲ. Okay, so first thing is it's everywhere. Second thing is the way you assure there is least manipulation. There is no such thing as no manipulation, is to get agreement on criteria. Then you can demonstrate internally and externally if violations were here. And you have to take it out, and this is the second part, which is where we started with, you have to take it out of the laws of particular land. Currently, the Indian law doesn't allow you to do that. This is part of the problem. So can you, I keep saying this, it's like US Congress deciding कि Sikh कौन है. ये हो रहा साढ़े ना 3 million बंदे ने नाले हो रहा बंदे जनानियां बच्चे ना. So we have to take it out of the legal manipulation. ਸਾਡੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੁਚੱਜੇ jurists ਤੇ lawyers ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਡੀ ਗੱਲ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ issue ਤੇ, including with international diplomats who understand what's happening. And I can share with you there is a good news. Don't think everything is bad. There is principally an agreement between the influencers. I have personally gone and talked to both in establishment and outside establishment. They all agree principally what is happening is thoroughly bad. Now, how to make it happen? मैं तो एक anecdote quickly दे देना. मैं तो establishment के बंदे ने आप क्या? कहते यार जे एक दो जने ऐसी कुछ कराने ना ऐसी टंगे जाने हैं ऐसे. And those of you understand Punjab politics, look at what happened to Kuldeep Singh Wadala 15 years ago. He was the second in command. He's nowhere to be found. कहते जितना माहौल होगा ना, फिर 1/3 या 2/3 जब design करेंगे फिर चीजें change होंगी. So you have to work. This is what I mean by governance and consensus building. So see, उतना ही किसी को कहो तो कुछ भी नहीं होगा. You have to work with people to get the changes happen as well.
Can I add part of your question or? Okay, part of your question. Let's say this is successful. I mean, and you know the government in India is going to try to block it. What do you do then?
This is where we bring in Sikhi. Every single incident in Sikh history, if you ask me analytically, there's less than 1% chance of making it succeed. But the whole history is all about if we are Guru-centered. The whole history is literally about without resources, without people, without imperial mandates, we've been able to turn it. I brought it to 3006. Can you imagine if there were 3006 today and they were taking on ISIS, the world would know who we were. That's what we did in the 18th century. We actually don't have the memory of Sikhs being invoked today in a truest way. 3000 ਸਿੱਖ ਜੇ ਵਾਕਈ ਹੋਵੇ ਨਾ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਦੀ ਫੌਜ ਹੋਵੇ, ਡਿਪਲੋਮੈਟਸ ਹੋਣ, ਪੋਇਟਸ ਹੋਣ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਦੇ ਹੋਣ, ਜਿਵੇਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸੀਗੇ, I'm sure we can kick some butt.
So, you know, I know we're focusing on Punjab and the Akal Takht, but one thing I noticed here, the majority of this talking was in English, right? So do we want to focus at all outside of Punjab as well, so how we can spread this message faster? I mean, one of the things, for example, on those in the Gurdwaras, and I'm not trying to criticize, I love Punjabi, but, you know, the reason a lot of the kids don't come because none of the speeches are made in English, or there's no proposal that maybe, you know, we need to maybe have a strike of balance between, so we can spread this kind of, you know, message quicker and faster, make it grow faster.
We made a simple rule in our projects, everything will be in Punjabi and English. We work with communication. Guru's message is very clear. Pasha, which matters is of love. Pakhya Pavapar. It doesn't matter what language he needs, because of resourceless or because of technology. We start with English, we are making it Punjabi available. We are working primarily in diaspora. Now I'm working in last month with Punjab as well. The idea is you have Sikhan in 7-8 subcultures in Dunia. We got to get out of this Punjabi non-Punjabi business. This is one of the criteria that kept on ethnicity based. Can you imagine today having Panji Pyares who are not Punjabi or Jathedars who are not Punjabi? 4 out of 5 are non-Punjabis. We have actually lost our principles in value system. We are too focused on ethnic, caste, and those kind of ideas. So it is not about language. It's about communication. ਜੇ ਹਿੰਦੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਊਗੀ, ਜੇ ਯੂਪੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, ਤੇ ਗੁਜਰਾਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ, ਫਿਰ ਕਿਉਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ? This is oxymoron stuff. ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਹੈਗੀ ਪਿਆਰ ਦੀ। ਉਸ ਪਿਆਰ ਦੀ ਭਾਸ਼ਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਪੈਰਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਤਾਂ ਵੈਸੇ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਤਾਂ ਫ੍ਰੈਂਚ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਰਨੀ ਪਵੇ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਉਹ ਫ੍ਰੈਂਚ ਤੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਸਮਝਦੇ ਨੇ ਨਿਆਣੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੰਗਰੇਜ਼ੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦੀ। So my point is, let's get out of this debate. This is not a debate, it's been thrown on us. And I want you to appreciate why it's thrown on us for a quick second. The reason Punjabi is so important, because again, 4/5 population lives in Punjab. So you cannot discount it. Second reason is, people who have championed Punjabi on the eastern Punjab are Sikhs, everyone else has left it. So we have a shared responsibility to actually own up to that as well. ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਜਦ ਪੰਥ ਲਈ ਕੁਝ ਕਰਨਾ ਆਇਆ ਨਾ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਬੰਦੇ ਹੀ ਮੋਸਟਲੀ ਉੱਠੇ ਨੇ, ਕੁਝ ਡਾਇਸਪੋਰਾ ਤੋਂ ਵੀ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ, ਐਂਡ ਲਾਈਕ ਆਈ ਸੈਡ 5 ਲੱਖ ਬੰਦਾ ਡਾਇਸਪੋਰਾ ਚ ਤਾਂ 20-25 ਹੋਣਗੇ, ਐਂਡ ਦੈਟ ਵਾਸ ਐਵਰੇਜ ਸਿੱਖ ਗਾਇਜ਼, ਆਈ ਕੈਨ ਟੈਲ ਯੂ, ਐਵਰੇਜ ਮੈਨ ਵੂਮਨ, ਪਿੰਡਾਂ ਦੇ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ, ਉੱਥੇ ਬੈਠਣ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਥਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂ, ਮੈਨੂੰ 45 ਮਿੰਟ ਲੱਗੇ ਸੀ ਸਟੇਜ ਤੱਕ ਜਾਣ ਨੂੰ, ਇੰਨੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਤੇ ਘੁੰਮ ਕੇ ਵਾਪਸ ਆਈ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਸੀ, ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਦੇयर ਵਾਸ ਨੋ ਪਲੇਸ ਲੈਫਟ ਟੂ ਸਿਟ. I cannot even tell you the level of spirit and anticipation only in the name of the Guru. So the point is कि जो language issue है ना, आप इससे बड़ा ना तवज्जो लिया करिए, गल है कि communication दी, गल है कि ideas नू बरकरार रखना.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have for questions. I'm sorry, we can take some more conversations offline. Budget briefing is going to start setting back up. Just for a couple minutes, everyone can see, at least in graphic form, the polling results. And while he's setting up, I just want to say a couple of things. Again, thank you to everybody who made the effort to come here today. I know these are sometimes not easy conversations to have, but hopefully it's getting some of us thinking about where are we going, what are we doing, and what can we ourselves do. If anyone is interested in actually becoming a volunteer for Akal Takht or getting more involved in this process and trying to help define the process, please make sure to see her in the Ruji, or you can also go online and sign up to be a volunteer. And secondly, just so that everyone is aware of some of the other programs going on, if anyone is free and interested and would like to come to our home this evening from 6 to 8 p.m., we are doing just a history session with Harinder Ruji on 18th century Sikh history. Just an overview and discussion. You are more than welcome to come. Please either see myself or Mandeep Singh, and we'll definitely give you our contact information. We'd love to have any of you there. And also tomorrow, the same town hall, so it's not an additional piece of information, but essentially the same thing is happening again tomorrow in the Windsor area from 4 to 6 p.m. So if you have friends or family in the local area that were not able to make it today, but you think would be interested in the information that was just presented, please make them aware of the program that's tomorrow. it'll be at the University of Windsor, so really just across the border. So for anyone who's interested in coming to that event, please let your friends and family know. And at the Rochester Sikh Gurdwara tomorrow, Virji will also be doing a 25-minute presentation on Guru Arjan Dev Ji in light of the current events happening in the memory, remembrance, Akhand Paths that are happening throughout Metro Detroit this weekend. That'll be 12:50. 12:30, we'll say, but 12:50 is when the real time. Okay, with that I will turn it over to Bhajanpreet Singh, and thanks again for all of your attention today.
Thank you. So I'll just quickly flip through some of the results. Okay, sorry, the formatting is a little off, but you can see the charts at the bottom. What you'll notice is, I mean, with so many of these questions, we had a lot of consensus, right? But there are some questions that pop like this, right? 67%. Is that enough? What do we think of that? And the fact that our global leaders got together and had consensus, but this is our consensus as Detroit, that to me is, this data is just as exciting as when we have that consensus. And how awesome is it that we've collected this data? When have we seen this data collected before in this kind of communication? So what we're going to do is we're going to share this online at Lumio. Again, the website is freeakaltakht.org/discuss. And we didn't exactly have time again to provide our opinions on why we disagreed or why we would like to block something. But please go on there, add your information there, add your opinions there. And the last comment that I would like to make, though, is that developing consensus is incredibly difficult, as Simji can explain to you and has shared some of his experiences. But my personal opinion is that if we don't, it's a habit. It's something that we have to learn to develop. And if we don't practice that on a local scale, in Metro Detroit, in our Gurdwara, and even in our local smaller Sangha groups of friends, if we don't practice that, we can't hope to achieve that ideal on a global level. So if you'd like to use Lumio, I can help you set that up. But I encourage you guys to have these conversations, continue these conversations with your friends and your families, and let's see how we can work together and develop consensus.
So let's put it more bluntly. Locally, there are 6 gurdwaras there, and maybe another 4 or 5 organizations who are representing one or the other things, whatever it might be. Those people need to figure out how to get together. And when you want to present a voice of Detroit 6, Detroit Metro 6, they need to come together in some format. If you need more help on this, in our team we have somebody named Bagale called from Toronto who actually specializes on how to build consensus, and she has worked in other movements outside of Sikh movements on how this is actually done. This is a real thing, guys. This is how, when we invoke memories of 18th century, the Guru period and this and that, this is how things used to get done. And the reason we are in this sort of a scenario of things are not happening is because we have stopped doing certain things. So Shabad nu invoke karna bahut zaruri hai. And Shabad nu jehde invoke karenge, they will get into some of these governance principles as well. I want to leave with one warning from one of my favorite South Asian poets, because things actually are getting worse, not better, in terms of governance. Just within the last 3 months, they have passed a bill to reduce number of Sikhs who are allowed to vote to select their leaders. Not religiosity, to select their leaders. Second thing they have done is they invoked in Punjab again the memories of SYL, those of you know 84 scenarios. Right after June 84, a week later they started the digging of that canal. And the second canal reorder was issued when Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, but the sitting Chief Minister is invoking that memory that he will work for the water rivers. So they want to become Panthik again. That's my point, manipulation again. And yes, in PLA, which is Punjab Legislative Assembly, they passed a bill, ceremonious bill, which just makes us look like more like what happens in Pakistan, is to create some absurd sort of sentencing on the Bedouins, but not doing the real policing. So they still don't catch anyone, but they passed ceremonial bills, which they did. So one thing was done by Supreme Valdan, another thing was done by his dad, and another thing was done by Mr. Modi. 3 bills have been passed. They all are ceremonial things or serious sort of reduction of Sikhs selecting their leaders, we have to become much more vigilant. Punjab de vich bhi te bahar bhi, because every single party of India comes to gurdwaras in the west to fundraise. Every single one. So next time somebody tells you why Sikhs are not interested, tell them, why do you come to gurdwaras to do fundraising? It's not a Sikh issue. So ये ना तानू थोड़ा जा तंदुरुस्त होना पड़ना mentally, mind दी गल है. You have to ask the right questions, ask them firmly, ask them to respond to it, and yes, we are interested, and yes, sitting in diaspora, we are interested, because they all come to raise money here. Yeah? So make it very personal. If it's not personal to you, you won't do anything about it. And the warning I leave with, if there's a time, then I'll take your question. Iqbal का ना एक शेर हैगा. उन्हें ना Iqbal is an architect, you know, as a thinker, architect of Pakistan, a lot of other things as well. उन्हें एक शेर हैगा. वो कहता कि वतन की फिक्र कर नादान मुसीबत आने वाली है. Watan is homeland idea, country, desh, whatever you want to call it. Fikr kar nadan, nadan is ignorant person. Musibat aane wali hai, you know, the bad stuff is coming. Much more stuff is coming. Teri barwadiyon ke mashware hain aasmanon mein. You know, the BJP officially says they have already dealt with 6. They already said this. They've been saying this since first administration. Murali Manohar Joshi is on record, who used to be HRD ministers. He said it in front of me. He said कि सरदारों को तो हमने खत्म कर दिया, अब तो हम मुसलमानों के पीछे लगे हैं. So everything you see is legally already done, and they are going to introduce another bill very shortly, because in the current bill, which was produced in 1921, the Akal Takht is not under their governance. Effectively it is, legally it isn't, and they have already declared from the offices of Ajit Doval, who is the National Security Advisor. He's actually put it on record himself, not me, that we will be giving Sikhs the new next Miri Piri principle, and we will give, so what he's basically saying is, now we will include Akal Takht in the bill. This is about to happen. Aapna jo marji ek duje nu boli jaye, it makes no difference. You got to make sure where it matters, Utthe Galla hon, and that was Guru Nanak's message, ki sach sunai si sach ki vela. Make sure you speak it and make people speak it where it matters. Because sari manipulation utthe ho rahi hai. Hopefully you got some ideas on what the movement is about, why this is actually about every Sikh. This is not a political game. This is actually about governance of all Sikhs. And we need to become Shabad oriented, and Sangat oriented is what we are after. We need to completely disrupt it. You can't allow the same 35 to 100 men to make all the decisions. You need to fight for their space and become a representative. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.